Chapter 129. More than a dozen people dressed like generals rode down the hill, and the leader was the general who looked like Zhang Fei. More than a dozen horsemen lined up in a row, and the three saints of Ling Wu were so scared that they took a step back. On the contrary, Ko Xiaofan and the others were not afraid at all. Yu Qianzhou slowly walked toward the horsemen. When General Zhang Fei saw Yu Qianzhou, he was stunned and said, "Mr. Yu." The other generals also looked at each other. Sai Zhangfei was the first to dismount from his horse and clasped his fists. "Greetings, Mr. Yu." All the generals dismounted and clasped their fists. "Greetings, Mr. Yu." That day, Yu Qianzhou's song completely convinced them. In addition, he had a good relationship with the ghost general, so it was natural that they had to give him a greeting gift. The three saints of Ling Wu heaved a sigh of relief. Bai Changchun's disciple was really influential. These ghost generals had the same cultivation level as the ghost king, and any one of them could easily kill them. They didn't know why they surrounded Mount Ling Wu today. Fortunately, Yu Qianzhou was here. No need to be so polite. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand and said, "What brings you here today?" Sai Zhangfei didn't hide and said bluntly, "Today, we received a report from a spy saying that the spiritual energy here is fluctuating violently, so the great general specially ordered us to investigate the situation." "I see." Yu Qianzhou glanced at the foot of the hill. Damn it! Sure enough, they had nothing better to do after eating. Was there a need to investigate the situation in such a big way? However, it was probably caused by him breaking through the cave and removing the spiritual stones. Yu Qianzhou turned to Ko Xiaofan and the others and said with a gentle smile, "You go down the hill first, I will come later." The few of them were very cooperative and followed his instructions. They passed through more than 10 riders, and no one stopped them. When Red Lady saw Yu Qianzhou revealing a gentle smile at this moment, she saw Ko Xiaofan and the others walking away from her, leaving only the three of them. It seemed a little cold and cheerless. When she saw the ghost generals lined up in a row, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. Weren't they going to dig out 20 sky spirit stones? After a few thoughts, her face turned deathly pale. Her voice trembled as she pleaded, "Mister, please let the three of us go. It was San Nyang's fault just now. I shouldn't have played tricks on you." Ho Dequan and Huang Erwei were still scratching their heads in confusion. Seeing that Yu Qianzhou was still smiling, they couldn't understand what was going on. "I don't see why Yu Qianzhou is angry." Yu Qianzhou turned around and walked towards the generals. The smile on his face instantly turned gloomy. As he walked, he said, "Hong Sanyang, don't you think it's too late? If everyone apologized after doing something wrong, then everything would be fine. Wouldn't the world be at peace? What's the point of fighting and killing then?" "No." Hong Sanyang panicked. "Mister, please let Sanyang off this time." As she said that, she ran to pull Yu Qianzhou. "How dare you? How dare you be so rude to Mr. Yu?" Sai Zhangfei roared and stood behind Yu Qianzhou. With a swoosh, he unsheathed half of his saber from his waist. In a split second, more than 10 pairs of murderous eyes stared at Hong Sanyang. Sanyang knows her mistake. Sanyang really knows her mistake. "Mister, please let me go." Hong Sanyang staggered back. At this moment, Ho Dequan and Huang Erwei also knew that something was wrong. They were so scared that they didn't know what to do. In front of a group of Ghost King's late-stage generals, they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. "Generals, please kill these 3 demons on the spot. Don't leave a single one alive." Yu Qianzhou turned around and said coldly and mercilessly. As soon as he said that, the Ling Wu 3 saints were really scared out of their wits. The ghost generals were stunned. "We protect you because we respect you. What right do you have to order us around?" When they turned around, they saw Yu Qianzhou slowly raising a black token in his hand. They were shocked and immediately said in unison, "Yes, Mr. More than 10 black shadows with late-stage Ghost King's cultivation pounced on the Lingwu three saints. The screams came to an abrupt end. A mist of blood spread out. The three demons didn't even have a chance to fight back. Not even their corpses could be found. Yu Qianzhou's mind flashed with Hong Sanyang's voluptuous smile. He shook his head and sighed. What a pity for that pair of tits. I wanted to keep them for my use. Why did they have to show off their little tricks? They brought this upon themselves. More than 10 ghost generals flashed back and cupped their fists in unison, indicating that they had completed their mission. Yu Qianzhou nodded approvingly. Military management is the best. My orders are like a landslide. Wherever I point, I will attack without any discussion. Looks like I need to create an army in the cultivation world. There is a spiritual stone mine at the foot of this mountain. Since the three demons are dead, I can let your great general take over. Yu Qianzhou thought to himself. He had let Meng Yan take advantage of it. A spiritual stone mine? Great General thought that some treasure was about to appear, Sai Zhangfei said regretfully. Sai Zhangfei lamented. Spirit stones were of no use to ghost cultivators. What they needed was yin qi, not spiritual qi. However, he gestured to the people around him, and they immediately spread out to search. Obviously, they wanted to verify if what Yu Qianzhou said was true. Sai Zhangfei turned around and smiled apologetically. Mister, please don't blame me. It's not that I don't believe you. It's just that I have a military mission and I have to be cautious. I was wondering why you made such a big fuss. Turns out that Meng Yan had the intention to steal the treasures. As expected, none of them are good. But you guys are too late. I have already taken all the valuable things. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and smiled, expressing his understanding. As a soldier, if they couldn't even be careful, then there was no need for them to fight. They might as well take a knife to their own throats and save themselves the embarrassment of being defeated. He was very appreciative of this. Sai Zhangfei suddenly asked curiously. Mister, according to our information, didn't you guys go back? Why are there only a few of you left? Yu Qianzhou roared with laughter, then there's definitely a mistake in your information. Aren't I standing right in front of you? No way. Sai Zhangfei waved his hand with certainty. Even if our information is wrong, Demon King Aoli wouldn't lie. He is still with the great general. I heard it from his own mouth. He fought with a few experts from Fuxian Island a few days ago. In the end, both sides suffered some losses. At the same time, I received news from our scouts that there are only 6 people left on the Cloud Sky Peak. The others have already left. Demon King Aoli is one of the 10 great demon kings of the demon domain? Yes. He and the great general are the masters of this place. They are sworn brothers. Yu Qianzhou's face twitched. No way. They really left? Mister doesn't need to be suspicious. How can such a big target leave the demon domain without us knowing? But Mister doesn't need to worry. Maybe the 6 people on the Cloud Sky Peak are waiting for Mister. Sai Zhangfei comforted. Yu Qianzhou was still a little confused about what was going on. At this time, the ghost generals who were searching had already retreated. They indicated that there was nothing but a spirit stone mine. Sai Zhangfei nodded. It was exactly as Yu Qianzhou said. Mister, are you going back? Sai Zhangfei asked. Yu Qianzhou nodded. Everyone is going back. I naturally have to go back as well. If Mister doesn't mind, I can escort Mister for a while before reporting back. Yu Qianzhou saw that he was sincere. He thought that it would be best if they escorted him. He didn't have to worry about any accidents. He nodded. Then I'll have to trouble you. I'll call my fellow disciples first. With them around, Yu Qianzhou didn't have anything to worry about. He directly rode his sword down the mountain and found Ko Xuehua and the others. Ko Xuehua asked about the screams on the mountain just now. Yu Qianzhou only said that the 3 Ling Wu sages were killed by a group of ghost generals. He didn't say that he was the one who ordered it. Everyone who had some friendship with Hong Sanyang sighed. When they knew that the disciples of the various sects had already returned, they were even more shocked. Then, under the escort of Cai Zhangfei and the 4 ghost generals, everyone flew towards the Cloud Sky Peak without any worries. Chapter 130. The people on the Cloud Sky Peak were none other than the 6 consecrators of supporting Immortal Island. The elders of the other sects had 2 regrets before they left. One was that they didn't know who had injured the 6 consecrators of supporting Immortal Island, and the other was that they wanted to meet Yu Qianzhou. It was clear that Yu Qianzhou was not going to say anything about the first matter. As for seeing Yu Qianzhou, he did not know if Yu Qianzhou would be able to come back alive. Even if Yu Qianzhou could come back alive, he did not know how long it would take. After all, it wasn't their disciple, so they couldn't keep waiting with the people of supporting Immortal Island. In fact, the 6 consecrators were a little anxious after waiting for 2 days. They could clearly see their positions on the spiritual compass, but they didn't dare to go down to look for them. The warning from the person who had injured them was still fresh in their ears. They had also tried to use spiritual sense to transmit their voice several times, but the demon ghost region was really strange. Once spiritual sense transmissions touched the floating Yin fog, they couldn't be transmitted. Thus, they thought that the person who had injured them could actually injure them with spiritual sense. They couldn't help being even more shocked and didn't dare to act rashly. Hey! They're back. One of the consecrators stared at the compass in front of him and said strangely. When they heard this, they surrounded the compass. The spiritual sense light spots on the compass were flashing over in a straight line. Guan Dinghai said in a deep voice, "How dare they fly over on their swords? It must be that bastard Yu Qianzhou's idea again. Don't they know that flying on swords in the demon ghost region is very dangerous? How does Wei Wu teach his disciple?" His words sounded like a reprimand, but there was also a sense of pride. It was as if he was telling everyone that only Yu Qianzhou dared to do this in the demon ghost region. The few consecrators smiled slightly, laughing at him for belittling and secretly praising. However, this disciple had really made the Guan clan and supporting Immortal Island famous in the various sections. Otherwise, why would the 6 consecrators be waiting for them here? The strange thing was that the 6 disciples didn't seem to encounter any danger along the way. They didn't slow down at all and were already approaching the mountain top. The few consecrators were also relieved, especially Ma Jiugu and Guan Weiwu. The 6 of them stared down together. The 6 streaks of light pierced through the dark clouds and landed near the mountaintop before disappearing. The 5 ghost generals who came with him cupped their hands together and said, "Mr. Yu, have a safe journey." Yu Qianzhou returned the gesture and said, "Thank you 5 big brothers. I won't say anything else. I, Yu Qianzhou, will remember this favor and will repay it in the future." The 5 ghost generals cupped their hands again, then turned into several streaks of black fiends and left. Their speed was much faster than when they had sent the group over, and they left with sharp whistles. With the cultivation of Yu Qianzhou and the others, they could not see the situation at the top of the mountain, but the 6 consecrators at the top of the mountain could see their situation. They were all stunned. To think that 5 Ghost Kings final stage ghost cultivators would send them off personally. This was a little too much. Guan Dinghai grinned and scolded, "This stinking brat is really arrogant. He actually made 5 Ghost Kings final stage ghost cultivators send him off, and there are 6 great consecrators greeting him on the mountain. I'm afraid that even if this old man came to the demon ghost domain, I wouldn't have such treatment." He didn't think that he had already been beaten out of the formation. Yu Qianzhou led the group to the outside of the formation at the top of the mountain. He didn't dare to barge in and shouted, "I wonder which seniors are inside." Disciple Yu Qianzhou requests an audience. Ma Jiugu struck a spell outside the formation and said in a deep voice, "Just walk in." Why is this voice so familiar? Yu Qianzhou was startled, and the group walked in. When they saw Ma Jiugu, they were startled again and thought, "Why is she here?" Ko Xuehua bowed and said, "Disciple Ko Xuehua greets the few consecrators." Amongst these people, only Ko Xuehua had seen a few exalted, and Yu Qianzhou and the others were utterly unable to recognize all of them. They immediately bowed as well, and all of them were extremely shocked in their hearts. Why are the 6 exalted of supporting Immortal Island here? Yu Qianzhou thought, could it be that the experts of supporting Immortal Island who fought with the demon king Aoli are these people? After a while, Yu Qianzhou felt that something was wrong. The gazes of this group of old fellows were revolving around him. It really made his hair stand on end. It was a far cry from being stared at by a group of beautiful women. "You are Yu Qianzhou?" Guan Dinghai shouted in a deep voice. "Damn it! Old bastard, did I offend you?" Yu Qianzhou bowed and said, "Yes, I am." "All right, this is not a place to stay for long. We can talk after we return." "Dinghai." Ma Jiugu poked her walking stick and shouted. Guan Dinghai bowed and didn't say anything. He glared at Yu Qianzhou and released a flying ship that was much smaller than the one the disciples came with. After the group boarded, Guan Dinghai personally controlled the flying ship. It gradually accelerated and disappeared in the blink of an eye. On the flying ship, Yu Qianzhou was hiding in the back. Seeing the others sitting cross-legged and cultivating, he sneered in his heart. "Even if you sit for a year, you won't be worth a few supreme-grade spirit stones of mine." Therefore, he fell asleep with peace of mind. Xiao Wanqing, on the other hand, looked at him from time to time with envy in her eyes. The night had passed, and the sea was sparkling with the rising sun. The flying ship suddenly slowed down, and Yu Qianzhou, who was sleeping soundly, was thrown to the front. Fortunately, he was stopped by Xiao Wanqing, who was always concerned about him, but he still fell on his face a few times. Yu Qianzhou crawled up and shouted angrily, "F***ck." Just as he said these 2 words, he realized that many pairs of eyes were looking at him. He immediately looked out of the ship and said embarrassedly, "We became supporting Immortal Island so quickly? Huh, so fast, so fast." With that said, he sat down guiltily, thinking that they wouldn't understand the first 2 words. Although the crowd didn't understand what he meant by the first 2 words, they didn't think that it was anything good, so no one paid attention to it and just smiled. Xiao Wanqing covered her mouth and couldn't stop laughing. Guan Dinghai, who was at the bow of the ship, looked back and thought, "This is really out of control. I've been flying the ship for a night, and you're really not polite. You actually slept for a night. I'll let you sleep." When the 6 high officials returned, the welcoming scene of Fuxian Island was quite grand. Feng Xiangtian led a group of elders to welcome them in front of the main hall of Penglai Pavilion. When everyone got off the ship, Yu Qianzhou was still hiding at the back. Seeing that there was no need for these disciples, he found Guan Weiwu in the welcoming crowd and quickly ran to greet, "Master, I'm back." When he saw Ferdinand beside his master, he greeted, "Elder Fei." Guan Weiwu patted his shoulder and laughed, "It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back." "Not bad, not bad." Regarding his disciples' glorious deeds, he, as the master, also benefited greatly. The group of people who came back earlier had already spread the news about Yu Qianzhou in the Demon Ghost region, and almost everyone in Fuxian Island knew about it. These 2 days, Guan Weiwu was so happy that he couldn't even close his mouth. Ko Xuehua and the other 3 disciples of Wanfen Garden naturally came to greet Ferdinand. This Ferdinand was also very happy. Although there were only 3 people from Wanfen Garden, they all came back alive. Especially when all the nascent soul stage disciples of Fuxian Island were annihilated, only Ko Xuehua of Wanfen Garden was unharmed. Speaking of this, it was really glorious. In fact, Ko Xuehua and the other 2 were also very lucky. Originally, Ferdinand sent them to protect Yu Qianzhou, but the result was unexpected. If it wasn't for Yu Qianzhou, they really didn't know if they could come back alive. Old Guan, this is your disciple Yu Qianzhou? Not bad. Elder Guan, this is your disciple Yu Qianzhou? Not bad. Elders from various branches constantly came to greet Guan Weiwu, but their eyes were all staring at Yu Qianzhou. Guan Weiwu kept laughing and said, "Yes, yes." Yu Qianzhou kept nodding and bowing as he called out the name of an elder. "Weiwu, come with me for a while." Suddenly, someone walked over and said coldly. Guan Weiwu's smile suddenly froze on his face, and he said timidly, "Father." Then he followed that person. Damn! That old bastard is actually Master's father? Yu Qianzhou was also stunned. Isn't this the consecrator who controls the spaceship? Thinking of a white-haired old man calling another white-haired old man father, Yu Qianzhou had goosebumps all over his body. He thought to himself, I have to quickly refine the elixir of youth. It's still good to be young. He stealthily disappeared into the crowd. Chapter 131. A ray of light flashed by, and Yu Qianzhou returned to the courtyard that he hadn't seen for many days. In fact, this round trip to the demon ghost region didn't take more than 10 days. He released his divine sense to check, but Ling Feng and the others weren't there. They probably went to work. He returned to his room, closed the door, and disappeared. When Guan Yu and Chen Feng saw Yu Qianzhou, they both called out with a sad expression, "Boss." Something was wrong? Yu Qianzhou nodded with a smile and walked to their side. He saw nearly 400 people gathered in a depression in front of him. They were the disciples from the various sects that he had brought from the demon ghost region. All the men and women were sitting on the ground with dispirited spirits. Their natal primordial spirits had been stripped away by Baisuzhen, so their spirits weren't much better. These two fellows probably thought of him when they saw them, and it felt like they were in the same boat. Yu Qianzhou frowned, turned his head, and shouted, "Don't think too much. Don't you know what kind of person Sister Bai is? By the way, Chen Feng, have you planted the spirit herbs I asked you to?" "Yes," Chen Feng replied. "I want to refine a cauldron of pills. Help me get 3 portions." Yu Qianzhou nodded. After Chen Feng left with the order, he looked at the disciples in front of him, pinched his chin, and began to ponder. Not long after, Chen Feng brought him the spirit herbs. Yu Qianzhou's eyes swept over the two of them. He was silent for a long time, making the two of them a little uneasy. Then he said with a very serious expression, "There are some important things for you to do. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I've been very worried." "What are you worried about?" "I'm worried about whether you two can do it." "Why worry?" "Because you two are worthy of my trust." After saying this, the 3 of them fell silent. After a while, Guan Yu and Chen Feng exchanged glances, and Chen Feng said excitedly, "Boss, if you have anything to say, we'll do our best." Yu Qianzhou patted him on the shoulder and said, "This matter is of great importance, and it is indeed related to our future. Forget it, let's not talk about this for now. I'll try a batch of pills first, then I'll come back and have a good talk with you too." Only the 2 of them were left with strange feelings. Yu Qianzhou teleported directly into the omphalos. The misty array immediately made way for him when he arrived. After he entered, the array closed up again. It was Baisuzhen who was controlling it from inside. Ever since she had obtained a pile of these things, Baisuzhen had not gone out at all. She had been guarding the Adumbra flower all this time, afraid that it would be stolen. Yu Qianzhou could not help but feel excited as he looked at the huge pile of top-grade spirit stones sparkling with purple light. This was his fortune. He grabbed a handful and scattered them. This was money. "Sis, let's begin," Yu Qianzhou said to Baisuzhen after enjoying himself to his heart's content. The latter nodded. Her usually gentle and quiet face was flushed with excitement. For a woman, youth was not always an irresistible temptation. Yu Qianqiu climbed onto the black lump and stared at the Adumbra flower carefully. He had not looked at it carefully ever since he found it. Legend had it that it took 1,000 years to grow a single strand, but there were actually close to 200 strands. Didn't that mean that this Adumbra flower had grown for close to 200,000 years? It was a bit difficult to make a move. Close to 200,000 years. What kind of concept was that? It was a sin. Yu Qianqiu silently muttered, "Sin, sin," as he stretched out his fingers and gently plucked out 3 strands. After jumping down, he waved the white velvet strands in front of Bai Suzhen and said with a bitter smile, 3,000 years for such a small thing. Bai Suzhen nodded and suddenly asked doubtfully, "Is 3 enough? Should I pluck some more?" "It's enough, it's enough." Yu Qianqiu hurriedly waved his hand and said, "1 strand for each set of spiritual herbs is enough. Sis, don't look down on this little thing. This is a heavenly treasure that only grows a single strand every 1,000 years. It's not good to use too many of these pills. 1 strand is just right." The two of them exited the formation and entered a small cave. Deep underground, the temperature gradually rose and they could vaguely see the red, rolling lava in front of them. The two of them turned into a newly excavated stone room. Flames were raging inside and a hole in the center of the room was spewing out raging flames. Bai Suzhen waved her large sleeves and a pill furnace beside her flew up, just in time to suppress the fire. The stone room immediately darkened. Yu Qianqiu took out the pill recipe Jade Archive and found the Rui pill among the top-grade pills. He repeated the pill recipe that he had already memorized and compared it in his mind. Then, he practiced it a few times in his mind. After making sure that there were no mistakes, the pill furnace was almost ready to heat up. The lid of the furnace opened and a strand of Adumbra flower was thrown into the furnace along with several spiritual herbs. Yu Qianqiu immediately sealed the top of the furnace and concentrated on refining. Suddenly, he noticed a strand of divine sense attached to the walls of the furnace. Needless to say, it was definitely Bai Suzhen's. There was no one else here either. Not long after, the various spiritual herbs were refined into sparkling liquids of various colors. When that strand of Adumbra flower was refined, it immediately turned into a tiny drop of spiritual liquid that shone brightly. A heavenly treasure was indeed a heavenly treasure. Ordinary spiritual herbs couldn't compare to it. Yu Qianqiu steadied his mind and immediately became as calm as still water. He used his divine sense to control the airflow and the various spiritual liquids, starting a magnificent performance. Light and shadow crisscrossed and intersected like a dream. Bai Suzhen was mesmerized as she watched. Although she wasn't proficient in alchemy, she had traveled the cultivation world for many years and more or less knew a little about alchemy. She had never seen such a bold and unconstrained refining method. It was simply inconceivable. It wasn't until the performance in the furnace was over and the pills were formed and being roasted that Bai Suzhen leisurely retracted that strand of divine sense. Her bright eyes looked towards Yu Qianqiu, who had his eyes closed and was meditating. A trace of infatuation flashed in her eyes. "Big sister, catch the pills." Yu Qianqiu slammed his palm into the furnace lid and in an instant, 10 balls of light rushed out of the furnace. Bai Suzhen, who had regained her senses, opened her slender palm and the 10 balls of light drew a beautiful arc in the air before gathering in her palm. Yu Qianqiu immediately ran over with a smile on his face. When he suddenly saw the dazzling balls of light in Bai Suzhen's palm, he was immediately stunned. He took one of the pills from her hand. Even he himself was taken aback. The Rui pill between his fingers was so blurry that it was almost impossible to see what it looked like inside. It was shrouded in a layer of pill halo. The pill halo was completely different from the pill halo he had seen before. It was actually a dazzling rainbow glow. It could probably be used as a light source in a dark place. Bai Suzhen covered her mouth in shock. Yu Qianzhou smiled foolishly and said, "Big sister, it should be a success." The former nodded vigorously. If this wasn't a success, then what was? Although the pill recipe Jade Archive didn't record this phenomenon after the pills were formed, anyone could tell that this furnace of pills was quite successful. Yu Qianzhou didn't have much experience with this kind of situation. He attributed it to the miraculous effects of the Adumbra flower. However, he didn't know that the pill refining method he had unintentionally invented was already qualified to establish his own sect. He had to admit that it was a stroke of good fortune. However, a certain someone was completely unaware of it. He continued to work hard and produced another 2 batches of pills that were 100% successful. From Yu Qianzhou's point of view, this wasn't strange at all. He had never refined a failed pill before. If the seniors of the pill sect from thousands of years ago were to find out about this, they would probably be so ashamed that they wouldn't be able to show their faces. Chapter 132. He placed the 2 batches of completed pills into his storage pouch. Bai Suzhen held the 10 rainbow glow pills in her palms and handed them over. Yu Qianzhou was taken aback and gently blocked them with his hand. Then, he looked at her and shook his head lovingly. He said softly, "This pill is called the Rui pill. It's one of the best quality pills in the elixir recipe Jade Archive. Its effects are extraordinary. It has the miraculous effect of detoxifying and maintaining youthfulness. It's the best pill for women to maintain their skin. Sister, it's just right for you to keep. Besides, the first batch of pills was originally meant for you." Bai Suzhen's eyes were filled with tenderness. She didn't say anything and simply nodded her head. Then, she put the pills into her waist pouch. With a wave of her sleeve, the pill furnace flew up and landed in a corner of the stone room. In an instant, the room was filled with a fiery red color. The 2 of them tacitly walked out. Yu Qianzhou stood at the peak of the mountain and watched as Bai Suzhen fluttered on the cliff wall of the deep valley. With a wave of her hand, she wrote the words, "Forbidden Area," with an imposing aura. Her graceful figure once again twisted in the air and gently landed beside him. A cool breeze blew, and her beautiful hair fluttered. The 2 of them stood there silently, quietly looking in the direction of the bamboo house. "Sister, I like the feeling of standing on a high place." Sister, shall we build a house on this mountain?" Yu Qianzhou turned his head and stared at the peerless beauty beside him for a while. His heart was at peace. Not long after, Guan Yu and Chen Feng, who were summoned by his divine sense, arrived on their swords. The 2 of them landed and called out in unison, "Boss." Yu Qianzhou smiled and took out 2 purple crystals, handing them to the 2 of them. He said, "These are very precious. I almost lost my life in the demon domain to get them. It's not much. Each of you can take 10. Bai Suzhen's eyes were still calm. Chen Feng looked at the purple crystals in his hand and scratched his head. "Boss, what is this?" Guan Yu seemed to be in disbelief. He looked at the purple crystal in his hand and touched it. After a long time, he cried out involuntarily, "Is this a top-grade spirit stone?" "Ah." Chen Feng hurriedly held it in front of his eyes and said with widened eyes, "Could it be a top-grade spirit stone that can be exchanged for 10,000 top-grade spirit stones?" "Not bad." Yu Qianzhou laughed and scolded, "2 useless things, aren't they just a few stones? Quickly put them away, I still have something to tell you too." The 2 of them carefully put them away in their storage pouches. Chen Feng's eyes were slightly red as he muttered, "Earlier, you said that you nearly lost your life to get this. Now, you say it's just a few stones. Brat, you've learned to talk back to me." Yu Qianzhou jokingly scolded. As he spoke, a rainbow-colored light flashed in his hand, and he handed one to each of them, saying, "This is the good stuff, I just refined it." The 2 of them held the rainbow-colored light in their hands and looked at each other. Guan Yu said blankly, "Boss, what is this?" Yu Qianzhou laughed and said, "Rui pill, a pill that can make you look young. Any scars on your body, as long as you take it, I guarantee that they will immediately disappear and you will be as good as new. It can also give you a physique that is immune to all poisons. It is also refined from the treasures I obtained from the demon domain this time. Look young? A physique that is immune to poisons? That is really a treasure." The two of them were pleasantly surprised and seemed to be considering whether they should take it now. "All right, put away the treasures first. The two of you have taken your things, it is time to be obedient and work." Yu Qianzhou pretended to be unhappy. He said it so directly, but the two of them did not mind. They smiled and put away the treasures, then bowed and waited for orders. Yu Qianzhou suddenly waved his hand and pointed, "I want to build a palace on top of this mountain. Now, I want to ask the two of you, do you have the confidence to build it for me?" "Ah." The two of them were shocked and looked around. To build a palace on top of a mountain, how big of a project would that be? Though their abilities were thousands of times stronger than mortals, with their abilities alone, they really did not know how long it would take to build it. The two of them looked at each other. This treasure was really hard to obtain. Guan Yu bitterly smiled, "Boss, it's not that. It's just that our abilities are limited." Chen Feng also nodded. "You two idiots." Yu Qianzhou pointed down the mountain and said, "I brought so many people here for you to use, what are you afraid of?" "Ah." The two of them were shocked. Guan Yu bitterly smiled again, "Boss, you know that the weakest of those people are at the completion level. How can we command them?" "Humph." Bai Suzhen slowly turned her head and stared at the two of them. She calmly said, "With me here, just order them around. If they don't listen, just kill them." Her tone was very calm, but the coldness in her words was very easy to sense. The three men were all stunned. Yu Qianzhou scratched his head and smiled, "You two just do as I say. If they don't listen, I'll deal with them. But you have to know your limits. If they can repent, you have to give them a chance. You can't kill them all. These people are still useful to me." Guan Yu and Chen Feng looked at each other and solemnly said, "Sister Bai, we understand." They directly ignored Yu Qianzhou's words, causing the latter to keep signaling them with his eyes. It couldn't be helped. To Yu Qianzhou, Bai Suzhen's prestige in Utopia was very important. When he wasn't around, he needed someone he could trust to take care of everything. He could only purse his lips and say, "As long as the two of you know what to do. As for the blueprints and materials needed to build the palace, I'll think of a way to get them as soon as possible. You don't have to worry about that. There's another important matter. You two have to be mentally prepared." Seeing that he was talking about serious matters, the two of them stopped laughing and looked at him seriously. Yu Qianzhou solemnly said, "Yunchang, get rid of all the women among the 400 people. There are many people in Utopia, and things are complicated. It won't do if you don't have some people under you. Those women will listen to you. As for the others, I'll leave them to you." At this point, he paused and stared at Guan Yu with sparkling eyes. He shouted, "Yunchang, haven't you always wanted to lead an army to the battlefield like Guan Yu? All right. I'll give you my full support and give you this opportunity. I want to build an army of the cultivation world, an invincible army of the cultivation world. These hundreds of people will be your touchstone. Do you have the guts to take on this responsibility? If you can't, say it as soon as possible so that I can find someone else." The moment he said that, Guan Yu and Chen Feng were shocked. Oh my God! What was he trying to do? Why did he want to build an army of the cultivation world? On the other hand, Bai Suzhen stood there calmly. Yu Qianzhou continued to stare at Guan Yu with a burning gaze. To him, the existence of an army required a strong financial power. Now that the conditions were ripe, a large number of supreme-grade spirit stones would suffice. Even if it was not enough, as long as the army was built, there would naturally be a way to make money. Wasn't there a saying like robbing the rich to give to the poor? At first, Guan Yu's blood was boiling, but he did not immediately agree. After calming down a bit, he slowly said, "Boss, I have the guts, and I really want to take on this responsibility. However, I've never done such a thing before. I'm afraid I'll ruin Boss's big plan. It's good that you know how to think carefully. I was really afraid that you would agree without thinking. If that happened, I really wouldn't dare to let you do this. Now it seems that I didn't misjudge you." Yu Qianzhou smiled and patted his shoulder. "Yunchang. There's a first time for everything. As long as you do it diligently, there's nothing you can't do. Perhaps you'll have to take more detours, but it doesn't matter. I believe that you can do it well. Don't worry. I know a little about leading troops. When the time comes, I can give you some ideas." "That's settled. From today onwards, those few hundred people will be your subordinates. Don't care if they're core formation or original infant. You only need to know one thing. They're all your soldiers." With Yu Qianzhou's words as a foundation, Guan Yu immediately nodded his head with great confidence. At the side, Chen Feng's face was full of envy. Which man didn't have the dream of galloping on the battlefield? Yu Qianzhou fiercely stared at him and shouted, "What are you looking at? You also have something to do. Tell me first if you have the confidence to do it. If you don't, I won't bother to talk to you. There are many people out there." "Yes, yes, yes." Chen Feng patted his chest and said passionately, "Boss, if you have something to say, I'll definitely do it well." In his opinion, since Yu Qianzhou dared to do something as crazy as building an army in the cultivation world, the mission he gave him must be extraordinary. If he didn't participate, he would be letting himself down. Chapter 133. That's good. Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, "Chen Feng, I'm sure you don't want your family's talisman crafting skills to be lost, right?" Chen Feng nodded and said, "Of course." "Good." Yu Qianzhou stared at him with a powerful gaze and said, "Then I'll let you become a master of talisman crafting, alchemy, and blacksmithing in one." Chen Feng scratched his head and said in surprise, "Boss, what do you mean?" Yu Qianzhou looked at the place where the various sect's disciples gathered and said leisurely, "A strong army must have a strong logistics support. Without logistics support, it's bullshit to build an army. In the cultivation world, alchemy and magic tools are indispensable. I'll find some subordinates for you. Your task is to ensure the necessities of Yunchang's army. As for alchemy and blacksmithing, I'll prepare them for you. Don't worry." After hearing that, Guan Yu nodded in agreement and looked at Chen Feng with hope. But the latter had a troubled expression. "That's what I'm doing. Then wouldn't I be doing odd jobs for Guan Yu?" "Boss, I also want to lead an army. You should leave the logistics to someone else." Yu Qianzhou glared and shouted angrily, "Then why did you agree so readily just now? Are you making fun of me?" "No, no." Chen Feng quickly waved his hand and explained, "I didn't know that boss was talking about this, so what?" Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes and interrupted him in a deep voice, "I'll give you two choices. 1. A man should do what he promised. 2. Pack up your things and go back to your 100 Flowers Valley to sell talismans. I can't tolerate a great bargaining god like you here." They had known each other for a long time. Every time Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes and spoke, it meant that he was really angry. Guan Yu looked at Chen Feng worriedly. After a long time, they had developed feelings for each other, and they were also familiar with each other. The two of them had a tacit understanding when they worked together. From a selfish point of view, he still hoped that Chen Feng would be the one to work with him. Of course, he had also placed himself in the main position, while Chen Feng was only a supporting character. I. Seeing that Yu Qianzhou was really angry, Chen Feng hurriedly said, a few times. Finally, he stomped his feet and said, Boss, don't be angry. I'll listen to you. I wouldn't dare. Yu Qianzhou coldly glanced at him and said, Yu Qianzhou, want brothers who help me sincerely. Don't force yourself to help my brother just to give me face. I won't force you. Just go and do what you need to do. I, Yu Qianzhou, have misjudged you. No. Boss, I'm sincere. Don't misunderstand. Chen Feng defended himself. The experience of setting up the stall in the 100 Flowers Valley had left a deep impression on him. At that time, he was so poor that he didn't even have enough to pay for the stall. Now, his storage bag was filled with top-quality spirit stones worth 100,000 high-quality spirit stones. Moreover, his boss was an idol to him. Are you sure? Yu Qianzhou asked suspiciously. Chen Feng patted his chest and said, I'm absolutely sincere. Sister Bai is here to testify. Oh. Yu Qianzhou's face immediately changed into a smile. He patted his shoulder and said, Good job. I knew I didn't choose the wrong person. Don't worry. One day, you'll find out that your choice was right. The three men finally had smiles on their faces. The little misunderstanding just now was gone in an instant. Yu Qianzhou patted their shoulders at the same time and said, That's right. Only when you're good and I'm good will everyone be good. Alright, you guys go get ready. I still have something to do outside. Then, he turned to Bai Suzhen and said, Sister, I'll be leaving first. The latter nodded and Yu Qianzhou disappeared in front of the three of them. As soon as he came out of the room, he saw Ling Feng and the other two. The three of them were already used to Yu Qianzhou's mysterious appearance. They immediately stood up and greeted, Yu Shishu. Sigh. These three unlucky kids are still in the Qi training stage. I really want to help you guys get out of this abyss of suffering. But it's better to grind it out. The rainbow after the storm is the most beautiful. At that time, people will truly know what it means to be grateful. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand, indicating that there was no need for formalities. He smiled and said, You're all back. I didn't see you guys on the way here, so I took a nap. Is everyone all right? Ling Feng smiled bitterly and said, What's good about it? It's still the same. I don't think so. Yu Qianzhou glanced at the three of them and said with a meaningful smile, Deacon Yen is staying in the demon domain and won't be able to return. I believe the situation will improve. He then added in his heart, This daddy has personally blasted his head into smithereens, so he definitely won't be able to return. Ling Feng smiled noncommittally and said, Let's not talk about him. It's just spoiling the mood. On the other hand, everyone in supporting Immortal Island knows about Martial Uncle saving the disciples of various sects from the hands of the Ghost King. Even the three of us benefited from living with you. Many people came to us to ask about you. Martial Uncle, tell us about what happened in Demonic Ghost Region. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He didn't know that he was already famous. He then waved his hand and said, I was just lucky. There's really nothing to talk about. That's it. I still have something to do. Let's talk next time. As he spoke, he had already flown away on his sword. Sigh. Looking at the departing figure, Ling Feng and the other two sighed at the same time. When they came back to their senses, they looked at each other and shook their heads with a bitter smile. They couldn't help it. The gap between them and him was getting bigger and bigger. There was no need to mention the things that happened in the past. Every time Yu Qianzhou came to Wanfen Garden, Ferdinand always had a sullen face as if he owed him a lot of money. This time, the sun rose from the west, and he kept nodding and smiling as soon as he saw Yu Qianzhou. There were two reasons. First, Ko Xiaofan and the others had told him in detail about their experience in demonic ghost region. It could be said that the 3 disciples of Wanfen Garden were saved by Yu Qianzhou. Just because of this, he was embarrassed to show his sullen face to Ferdinand. Second, he finally had an explanation for his daughter. But in Yu Qianzhou's eyes, no matter how he looked at it, he felt that there was a conspiracy. So, he tried to say something that usually made Ferdinand angry. "Elder Ferdinand, I'm a little hungry. Do you have anything to eat here?" Ferdinand suddenly smiled a little awkwardly. This kid really treated this place as a restaurant. His face twitched as he said, "There is something at the back. It's not right to agree so readily." Yu Qianzhou also said for the first time, "Thank you, Elder Ferdinand." Then, he followed him to the back of the main hall. As a result, as soon as he turned the corner, he met Furong, who came after hearing the sound. She hurried and shouted, "Yu Qianzhou." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, Senior sister, I'm hungry." Furong nodded repeatedly and turned to run back. She probably went to prepare something to eat. Ferdinand's face completely darkened. Yu Qianzhou glanced at it and heaved a sigh of relief. He was in the mood to eat first. Ignoring him, he took a familiar turn to Furong's place. Furong was busy putting more food on the table. Of course, he sat down without hesitation and ate to his heart's content. It would be a waste if he didn't eat. Ferdinand, who came in later, stared at him for a while and suddenly asked, "I heard that you made a lot of noise in the monster ghost region this time. Even Ghost General drank and chatted with you?" Furong tilted her small ears to listen. Yu Qianzhou also had something on his mind. As he ate, he replied, "It can't be said to be drinking and chatting merrily. We just drank a few cups. Ghost General is too polite." "Ghost General is too polite?" Ferdinand's face twitched involuntarily. He had also trained in the monster ghost region. How could he not know the reputation of Ghost General? He was an overlord. Now that he had confirmed the rumors, he was inexplicably shocked. He really couldn't understand what was so good about this guy. His daughter was obedient to him, but why would someone like Ghost General also listen to him? He paused and asked again, "I heard that you went deep into the hinterland of the monster ghost region and collected many spiritual herbs that even the disciples of Wanfen Garden have never seen before. Don't you know the rules of Fuxian Island? All the spiritual herbs collected in the monster ghost region must be handed over to the sect. Of course, we won't let you hand them over for nothing. The sect will give you a certain reward. Take them out and let me have a look." No wonder I felt strange. It turns out that you are after my spiritual herbs. I can't give them to you. They are all spiritual herbs with names on the elixir prescriptions. I still have a use for them. Yu Qianzhou raised his head and smiled at Furong. "Senior sister, can you go out for a while? I have something to say to Elder Fei." Furong pinched the corner of her clothes and turned it over and over again. She was obviously a little unwilling, but in the end, she still went out obediently. Ferdinand didn't know what he was going to do. After waiting for a long time, he heard him say lightly, "I just used them today." Immediately, he was so angry that he pointed his finger and shouted, "How dare you? Do you still have any respect for the sect rules?" He was indeed angry. Every principal elder of Wanfen Garden was proud of being able to add a few spiritual herbs to Wanfen Garden. This guy had collected so many rare spiritual herbs but used them privately. How could he not be angry? "Why are you so noisy?" Yu Qianzhou suddenly stood up and smashed the chicken drumstick in his hand on the ground. He pointed at him and shouted angrily, "Do you think I feel good every time I come here to eat because of your face? Do you know why I didn't agree to let Jiugu stay in the mulberry garden? Do you really think I'm stupid? Don't I know that mulberry garden is better than the alchemy pavilion? Do you think I'm comfortable in the alchemy pavilion? Do you think I'm a genius for creating my own alchemy technique in alchemy? That's what I often spend more than 10 days to figure out. Why is that? Because I saw that you, as a useless father, wanted to personally refine a good pill to treat senior sister's face, so I risked my life to go deep into the hinterland to collect spiritual herbs even though I knew that the demon ghost region was very dangerous. Now that I've put in so much effort and thought, God didn't disappoint my painstaking efforts and finally refined a healing pill. I couldn't wait to come here, but I was ridiculed by you. I finally know what it means to be cruel and unscrupulous. In fact, Furong didn't go far and just stayed outside. When she heard this, she covered her mouth with tears and tried hard not to cry out. Fei Danan was also confused by his extreme reaction at first, but at this time, he said in a trembling voice, "You mean you've already refined a pill that can treat Furong's face?" Yu Qianzhou was still not satisfied with the scolding and said sternly, "I've never seen such a heartless thing like you. I did collect a lot of spiritual herbs in the demon ghost region, but I didn't give them to the sect. I used them to refine pills. So what? I even gave up my life for senior sister, so why would I be afraid of an old man like you?" As he spoke, he took out a 7-colored spirit pill from his bag of holding and shouted, "I don't have any spirit herbs, only a refined spirit pill. Old thing, if you have the ability, then go against your conscience and hand this spirit pill over to the sect. I want to see if your conscience has really been eaten by a dog." Chapter 134. The soft colorful glow of the Rui pill lit up the entire room slightly, and a faint and unique fragrance slowly spread. Ferdinand's pupils suddenly widened. He took a step forward and directly grabbed the elixir in his hand. He put it in front of his eyes to look at it. After a while, he snorted and said, "It's really an elixir. This elixir is dizzy." His face was full of disbelief. Yu Qianzhou looked on coldly, and a smile flashed unintentionally in his eyes, but it disappeared slightly. At this time, Furong slowly walked in and walked to Yu Qianzhou's side. She held his arm tightly with both hands and stared at Ferdinand with extreme resentment. Yu Qianzhou felt the elasticity on his arm and looked at her with some surprise. He did not expect that a girl who was as thin as firewood would actually have a peerless treasure. Some things really needed to be understood in depth, and it could not be seen just from the surface. At the same time, he also noticed the resentment in her eyes. Yu Qianzhou could not help but open his mouth slightly. He looked back at Ferdinand, who was still amazed, and said in his heart, "Old man, I'm sorry. I just want you to owe me a big favor so that I can extort something in the future. I really did not mean to sow discord between you father and daughter. Hey!" He raised his hand and gently patted Furong's little hand that was a little pale. "This elixir can really cure Furong's face." Halfway through his words, Ferdinand looked up and found that his daughter was holding the man's arm in front of her chest. His face was distorted. That place is not for other men to touch. Taking advantage of someone else's daughter in front of him, the pressure he was under was really not ordinary. Yu Qianzhou quickly diverted his attention and sneered, "Don't you want to use the sect rules to suppress me? Who cares if it can be cured or not? Just give it to the sect directly." When Ferdinand heard this, he immediately noticed that his daughter was looking at him with an almost resentful gaze. He trembled all over and almost dropped the elixir in his hand. He stuttered, "Fu. Furong, I didn't mean that. Take it and try it. Maybe it will work." As he spoke, he handed the elixir over with trembling hands. However, Furong held Yu Qianzhou's arm tightly and took a step back. She bit her lips hard and stared at Ferdinand. The latter felt his hair stand on end, and his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. Even with his cultivation base, there was a thin layer of sweat on his forehead. In the end, he looked at Yu Qianzhou pleadingly. "What a pitiful parent. Old thing, now you know the consequences of challenging me." Things started because of him, so he had to find a way to resolve it. Otherwise, Ferdinand would hate him to death. Yu Qianzhou turned around and grabbed the little hand on his arm, whispering, "Senior Marshal Sister, since your father wants you to give it a try, you should give it a try." Ferdinand's mind was already in a mess, and his body was covered in cold sweat. Hearing that, he nodded at Hibiscus. However, Hibiscus shook her head hard and said, "I don't have a father, I don't want to cure it." It was rare for her to speak, but when she did, it was very scary. Yu Qianzhou was shocked to find that there was a touch of red on her lips. It was obvious that she had bitten it just now. He could not help but be stunned and a little stunned. Hearing that, Ferdinand suddenly felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His face instantly turned pale, and he staggered back a few steps. That touch of red almost broke his heart. Damn it! This is too much. If this goes on, old Phil will fight with me after this. Yu Qianzhou immediately pulled his arm out of that plump and short-of-breath chest. He took the elixir from Ferdinand's hand and gave it to Hibiscus. He said softly, "Senior Marshal Sister, your father really didn't mean that. Don't misunderstand. It will be good for you to take it." "No." Hibiscus spat out a word forcefully. She shook her head and retreated until she leaned against the wall. She still shook her head and refused. He had never seen this girl have the courage to refuse anyone. He did not expect that she would refuse so unhesitatingly today. She must be really sad. Yu Qianzhou suddenly felt that he had gone too far today. There was really no need to hurt her. He let out a depressed breath and said in a deep voice, "Senior Marshal Sister, do you believe me?" "Yes." Hibiscus looked at him with her bright eyes and nodded. "Then do you believe what I said?" "Yes." "Good." Yu Qianzhou walked over and pulled Ferdinand over with one hand. He pointed at him and said, "Then I will tell you. Look carefully, this person is your biological father. He is the person who treats you the best in the world. No one can treat you better than him, including me. You have to believe that everything he does is for your good. Senior Marshal Sister, can you understand?" Hibiscus did not say anything. She neither nodded nor shook her head. Ferdinand, who was casually grabbed like a child, looked at Yu Qianzhou with gratitude instead. "Senior Marshal Sister, this elixir was refined for you. It was really not easy for me to refine it. I really spent a lot of effort. Could it be that Senior Marshal Sister really has the heart to let my efforts go to waste?" As Yu Qianzhou spoke, he sent the fragrant elixir with colorful rays of light in his hand to her. It was one thing to help Ferdinand be a good person once, but he still had to be a good person himself. This was his habit. Facing Yu Qianzhou's extremely sincere gaze, Hibiscus hesitated. Finally, she summoned up her courage and timidly reached out her little hand to take the elixir. She lowered her head and gently put it into her mouth. With a slight gurgling sound, she swallowed it. The two men breathed a sigh of relief and glanced at each other with relief. Ferdinand's excitement could be clearly seen on his face. The two of them looked at Hibiscus again. To be honest, Yu Qianzhou really did not know whether this elixir would have the miraculous effect described on the Jade Archive. This was also the reason why he had not taken the elixir yet. Hibiscus was also silently feeling the changes of the elixir in her stomach. Just like that, the three of them hugged each other by the wall, not daring to breathe heavily. Fortunately, there were no outsiders to see this strange scene. Otherwise, if two men were to force a woman against the wall, anyone's imagination would run wild. After an hour or so, Hibiscus's body finally showed some changes. First, her whole body turned red. Then, on her face, hands, neck, and all the exposed skin pores gradually oozed out a jet-black liquid. A foul smell began to spread in the room. Hibiscus looked at Yu Qianzhou with a somewhat panicked expression. She kept wiping the dirt oozing out of the back of her hands on her clothes. Yu Qianzhou's face twitched a little. Ferdinand, on the other hand, shouted in surprise, "Hibiscus, don't move. The elixir is taking effect. After all, he was very experienced. He could see the reason at a glance. Sure enough, not long after, the foul smell began to be dispelled by the delicate fragrance emitted from Hibiscus's body. Then, the fragrance became stronger and stronger. Hibiscus's stomach began to make gurgling sounds, and she seemed to be restless. Ferdinand suddenly revealed a look of realization. He slapped his forehead, turned his head, and anxiously shouted, "Somebody, somebody! Somebody, come quickly!" 2 female disciples quickly came over. They did not know what had happened to make the elder-in-chief so urgently summon them. Without waiting for them to salute, Ferdinand ordered the 2 of them, "You take Hibiscus to the toilet to detoxify. You quickly go and prepare a large amount of hot water for her bath. Be quick." When the 2 of them saw Hibiscus, who was wrapped in a layer of black to the point that she could no longer be identified, they immediately understood. One of them left in a flash, while the other carried Hibiscus out without any fear of getting dirty. Ferdinand was obviously very excited. He kept clapping his fists and walking back and forth in the room. Detoxify in the toilet? Damn! The side effect of this Rui pill is even worse than the foundation-building pill. I wonder if Big Sister has taken it yet. With this thought in mind, Yu Qianzhou's divine sense unconsciously entered Utopia. Very soon, he locked onto a graceful figure by the distant lake. In the clear lake, the delicate body that was as fair as jade created layers of ripples. She got up from the water and walked to the shore. Her peerless face was extremely pure and serene. The water droplets that slid down her plump and upright breast splashed onto the lake's surface bit by bit. The 2 spots of red were mesmerizing, and countless traces of water slid down her smooth skin and elongated. Suddenly, her 2 jade-like arms pushed her wet black hair to the back, and her graceful figure was immediately revealed. Chapter 135. Yu Qianzhou was shocked and immediately withdrew his divine sense. He took a deep breath and tried hard to dispel the lingering reverie in his mind. After his mood stabilized, he shook his head secretly. There was a kind of woman who was a confidant in his heart. When the 2 were together, there was no worry, and the body and mind were relaxed and peaceful. It was a piece of pure land in a man's heart that could not be desecrated. Bai Suzhen was his confidant. She believed that if he wanted her body, she would not refuse. This method of peeping could be used on any woman, but it was not suitable for her. After more than 4 hours, the female disciple who was ordered to prepare the bath water suddenly rushed in and said excitedly, "Elder Fei, Senior Sister Furong, you should go and have a look." Got it. Ferdinand waved his hand and then turned back to glare at Yu Qianzhou fiercely. Then he hurried out. It seemed to tell him that if anything happened to his daughter, just wait and see. Yu Qianzhou judged from the female disciple's expression that it was probably a good thing. Otherwise, she would not be so excited, so he followed her. The 2 came to a side room one after another. As soon as they entered, Ferdinand suddenly stopped. Yu Qianzhou flashed out from behind him and was also stunned there. A woman was sitting in front of the bronze mirror in a trance. She kept rubbing her face with her palm. When she saw someone coming in, she slowly turned her head and revealed her beautiful appearance. Damn! This beauty is Furong? Yu Qianzhou's eyes widened. The beauty in front of him blocked her face, but her figure was indeed Furong's figure. It was just that her face seemed to have changed into another person, which was very different from before. Ferdinand trembled all over and nodded with tears in his old eyes. She looks like your mother. Yu Qianzhou looked at him suspiciously. No wonder you have an affair with your wife. It turns out that your lover is more beautiful than your wife. Yu Qianzhou. Furong stood up and shouted shyly. Yu Qianzhou scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly. So Senior Martial Sister's original appearance is this beautiful, heh? I really didn't expect that. Thinking of the time when he called her ugly in the mulberry garden, he really felt a little embarrassed. Furong immediately lowered her head shyly. A female disciple on the side said, "Elder, I'll help Shiji comb her hair." Ferdinand wiped his tears happily, laughed and said, all right, let's go out." After saying that, he also pulled Yu Qianqiu out. As soon as the two of them came out and walked back to the original room, Ferdinand suddenly turned around and stared at Yu Qianqiu. The smile on his face disappeared. After a long time, he said, "How many elixirs have you refined in this furnace?" Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly in his heart. It seemed like his daughter's face had been cured. Now that she had nothing to worry about, she wanted to fall out with him. Without changing his expression, he said, "Originally, one furnace was supposed to refine 10 pills, but in the end, 9 pills were wasted. Fortunately, there was still 1 pill left, otherwise, senior sister's face." As he said this, he shook his head. 9 out of 10 pills were wasted? Ferdinand raised his eyebrows and didn't show that he believed it. He turned to the side and said leisurely, "I'm afraid it's not an ordinary spirit herb. Otherwise, it definitely won't have such a miraculous effect. Yes. I believe that senior sister's face can stay young forever." Yu Qianqiu replied lightly. Ferdinand turned around and said, "What kind of spirit herb is it? It can actually stay young forever?" "If Ghost General is right, I believe that not only can it stay young forever, but it can also be immune to all kinds of poisons in the future." Yu Qianqiu stared at him and said slowly, "Ghost General said that the spirit herb is called Audiobook flower. I don't know if Elder Ferdinand has heard of it." Ferdinand's body shook, and his eyes lit up. After a long time, he returned to normal and sighed, "Treat Furong better. If there's anything I can help with in the future, don't hesitate to find me." "Humph. If you know about the Audiobook flower, you should know that it can't be cultivated. Your daughter has already used it, and you still want to bully me? You should know better than me the consequences of using this kind of heaven and earth treasure privately. Old thing, you have to return the favor you owe." Yu Qianqiu nodded calmly and said, "Got it, I'll go back first." After the incident in the demon domain, Fuxian Island gradually returned to normal. In the elixir refinery pavilion, Yu Qianqiu was undoubtedly the most free person. Without Yan Shu's constraints, no one cared about him. In addition, he was famous and was Guan Weiwu's personal disciple, so the elixir refinery pavilion let him do whatever he wanted and didn't arrange anything for him to do. He also kept a low profile and acted alone. He always had a smile when facing everyone, didn't fight with anyone, and didn't conflict with anyone. He was often very generous. As for the disciples of the other branches, he almost didn't interact with them. Other than a disciple called Shengjingxing from the Secular Objects Hall who often looked for him, there was also Gu Qingyun from the Cultivation Pavilion. In short, Yu Qianqiu had completely entered a period of hibernation. Behind the scenes that others couldn't see, he was abnormally busy. First, he spent a few months building a majestic hall on the tallest mountain in Utopia. After that, other than concentrating on cultivation, he accompanied Guan Yu to train the troops. In the process, there were definitely some who were disobedient, and Bai Suzhen immediately turned them into ashes. It had to be said that sometimes, killing the chicken to warn the monkey was very useful. At the same time, Yu Qianqiu constantly educated these people on political and ideological issues. Coupled with the generous treatment of spirit stones and spirit pills, the morale of the troops gradually stabilized. Of course, some necessary measures were unavoidable. As for the usual training, he rarely interfered. Instead, he often spent time to change Guan Yu's mindset and taught him alone. His requirement for Guan Yu was that the most important aspect of this small army was their quality. They had to be proficient in assassinations, ambushes, and all sorts of other effective combat methods to kill the enemy. They had to be able to achieve victory once they were deployed. Guan Yu's enthusiasm for these things was also unexpected. He threw himself into it wholeheartedly, and the various special warfare and training methods that Yu Qianzhou explained were even more astonishing. All kinds of advanced ideas and concepts were things that he had never thought of. At the same time, Yu Qianzhou gave Guan Yu a warning: the soldiers are fierce, but the generals are fierce. After the training of the troops got on track, Yu Qianzhou began to spend a lot of time on Chen Feng, personally teaching him alchemy and researching weapon refinement and talisman creation. The method and materials for weapon refinement were bought by Chen Gingqing from outside. Of course, he also gave him a lot of money for running errands. Chen Gingqing was never tired of such a good thing. Anyway, it was on the way. As long as you don't talk about it, it's good for everyone. In the blink of an eye, it was time for supporting Immortal Island to distribute the Foundation establishment pills. Yu Qianzhou diverted some of his attention to Ling Feng and the other two. As expected, the three of them did not disappoint him and all failed. Naturally, the three of them would be expelled from supporting Immortal Island. Yu Qianzhou sat on a stone bench and looked at the three dejected people in front of him. Behind him stood a peerless beauty who was gently massaging his back. This person was none other than Hibiscus. Ever since the scar on her face was healed, Hibiscus finally had the courage to come out and meet people. However, the way she came out was often a straight line. She would go back and forth between Wanfen Garden and Yu Qianzhou's residence. In her eyes, Yu Qianzhou was the only person she could trust. Chapter 136. Every time she came, she would bring some of Yu Qianzhou's favorite food. Once, Yu Qianzhou suddenly said, "Ferong, you have to improve your cultivation. Maybe I'll need your help in the future." Therefore, other than the appointment time with Yu Qianzhou, Ferong spent the rest of her time on cultivation. With the help of the medicinal pills personally refined by Yu Qianzhou, she successfully broke through to the core formation stage. As a result, Ferdinand was overjoyed. It was naturally a good thing to have someone to supervise his daughter's cultivation. In the cultivation world, what was more practical than improving one's own strength? Therefore, he was happy to see his daughter run to Yu Qianzhou. Moreover, he also knew that his daughter would not be able to leave Yu Qianzhou in this life. He also accepted his fate. "When are you leaving?" Yu Qianzhou looked at the three of them and smiled. Ling Feng sighed. "Sigh. I've woken up from my dream. It's time to leave. I think it'll be in a few days." Yu Qianzhou patted Ferong on his shoulder and signaled Ferong to stop and rest. Ferong obediently leaned behind him and looked at the four people sitting around with her bright eyes innocently. Ling Feng and the other two secretly sighed. Look at what kind of life she led. The dignified daughter of the Wanfen Garden's principal elder personally patted her back. Moreover, she was such a beautiful woman. The table was filled with snacks brought by Ferong. After Yu Qianzhou personally filled the 4 wine glasses on the table, he asked, "What are your plans after leaving?" The three of them looked at each other and shook their heads with a bitter smile. Ling Feng said with a bleak expression, "The three of us were orphans. We were brought to Fuxian Island when we were young and never left. Now, we don't even know what the outside world is like. After leaving, we really don't know what to do. You don't want to walk the path of cultivation anymore?" Yu Qianzhou held a wine glass and asked. Ling Feng shook her head. "There's no chance. There will never be a chance. 3 foundation establishment pills can't help a disciple who is expelled from the sect. Which sect in the cultivation world would take in the abandoned disciples of supporting Immortal Island?" Hearing this, Beizi picked up the wine cup in front of her and drained it in one gulp. She actually shed tears and cried, "Martial uncle, I really can't accept this. I really can't accept this." Xian Ping drank a cup of wine in a muffled voice. Yu Qianzhou filled up their cups again and said with a smile, "What if we still have a chance after we get out of here? Do you guys want some?" The three of them shuddered and looked at him. Ling Feng pondered for a moment and stood up in surprise. Does Martial Uncle have a clear path? If you can guide us, the three of us are willing to follow Martial Uncle's orders from now on. Yu Qianzhou smiled without saying a word. He glanced at the other two and raised his cup to drink. Beizi and Xian Ping immediately stood up and said, Martial Uncle, please show us the way. We are willing to listen to your orders. It's good to talk to smart people. Yu Qianzhou gave them a thumbs up. Then, he took out a small white porcelain bottle that was sealed and used to store pills and placed it on the table. He said with a smile, if the three of you still want to succeed in building your foundation, after you leave supporting Immortal Island, bring this bottle to the capital of Wuxia Empire as soon as possible. Go to the Pillar of State General's office and find a person called Shi Xiaotian. He is the third young master of the general's office. After you find him, tell him that I told you to find him. He will naturally arrange a place for you to stay and wait patiently. When the time comes, someone will come to help you build your foundation. Remember this well and don't forget it. The three of them were pleasantly surprised. They looked at each other and didn't know if this was true or not. Ling Feng took a deep breath and held the porcelain bottle in his hand. This was their only chance. Whether it was true or not, they had to give it a try. He repeated Yu Qianzhou's words again. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he nodded and said, Martial Uncle, we will remember your words. It's good that you remember it. You will have to grasp the opportunity yourselves. Yu Qianzhou then nodded and gestured for the three of them to sit down. He said, I heard that there are more than 10 disciples expelled from supporting Immortal Island. If possible, it is best to bring them with you. Consider this a test. Don't let the others know. The three of them exchanged glances and nodded. Martial Uncle, we understand. A few days later, in front of Penglai Pavilion's main hall, more than 10 dejected disciples boarded their flying magic tools under the supervision of 2 disciples from the Secular Objects Hall. These disciples had stayed on supporting Immortal Island for so many years, but they didn't even have anyone to send them off. On the contrary, Ling Feng and the other 2 had Yu Qianzhou and Furong to send them off. Seeing this miserable scene, Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but sigh at the fickleness of the cultivation world. One of the 2 disciples from the Secular Objects Hall was Chen Gingqing. Yu Qianzhou smiled at him and said, the 3 of them have lived in the same courtyard with me for many years. You have also seen them many times, so you can be considered acquaintances. Please take care of them on the way. They have old friends in the capital that they are going to seek refuge with. If it is convenient, try to get them to stay close to the capital. I know. You are so garrulous like an old woman. Chen Gingqing punched him and at the same time, he looked at Furong behind Chen Gingqing meaningfully and shook his head with a smile. Ling Feng and the other 2 bowed gratefully and said, Thank you, Martial Uncle, for sending us off. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and pointed at Chen Gingqing. Don't thank me, thank him. We still need him to take care of us on the way. Go, go, go. Don't listen to him. Hurry up and go up. There are people watching over there. Chen Gingqing pouted in the direction of Penglai Pavilion and pushed the 3 of them onto the flying magic tool. After watching a stream of light fly into the sky, Yu Qianzhou led Furong back to the small courtyard on his sword. With the 3 of them gone, the place suddenly felt a lot more deserted. Yu Qianzhou sat down on the stone bench and pulled Furong onto his lap. Feeling the elasticity of the heavy weight, he wrapped his arms around her slender waist and caressed her. The latter panicked and pressed his hand down, saying, Qianzhou, don't. Someone will see. So it's like that. Yu Qianzhou pondered for a while and suddenly carried her up, saying, Then let's go to my room. No one will see there. This caused the latter to scream in fear. Rushing into the room, he closed the door with his foot and threw Furong onto the bed. The 2 of them laughed and played with each other until their clothes were in a mess. In the end, they had touched all the places they wanted to touch. However, Yu Qianzhou still did not take off her clothes to make the final breakthrough. It was not that he did not want to do it, but when he wanted to do it, Furong always said that she was afraid. Therefore, Yu Qianzhou vowed, I won't force you. When you are not afraid one day, tell me. From then on, every time this happened, Yu Qianzhou would want to slap himself twice. He really didn't know if he was possessed or what was going on. He actually made such an oath, and now he could only slap himself. Thinking about how he was still a virgin after coming to this world for so long, damn. Furong, who was blushing, lazily lay in Yu Qianzhou's arms and said, Qianzhou, Father wants me to tell you that Fuxian Island will send more disciples to the Cultivation Alliance in a while. Cultivation Alliance? Yu Qianzhou's expression darkened. He sat up. Back in Ongquangsung, after his master Hao Sansi was killed by the Deluo sect, he had handed the matter over to the Cultivation Alliance to handle. In the end, it was left unsettled. He still remembered it. In front of the Pillar of State General's residence in the capital of Wuxia Empire, a dozen travel-worn people gathered at the entrance. They sized up the extraordinary residence and looked at the three people in front of them in confusion. The person in the lead walked up and knocked on the door knocker. After a while, the door was opened. A servant who was guarding the door walked out and asked with a frown, Who are you looking for? We are looking for the third young master of your residence, Shi Xiaotian. The person in the lead smiled and said. The servant looked at them again and asked doubtfully, Do you know our third young master? No, we don't. Please help us inform him that his old friend, Yu Qianzhou, asked us to personally bring something to him. Yu Qianzhou? The servant scratched his head as if he had heard this name before, but he could not remember where. However, his attitude immediately became much better. He nodded and said, Please wait for a moment, I will go inform him now. After saying that, he closed the door again. The crowd did not wait for long before they heard hurried running sounds from inside. Someone shouted, Open the door and welcome the guest. The person outside the door immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 137. The group of people at the entrance was none other than the disciples of Supporting Immortals Island who had failed to reach Foundation establishment and were expelled from the sect. Leading them was Ling Feng and the other two. They followed Yu Qianzhou's instructions and brought them to the Pillar General's residence. Most of these people had spiritual roots and were brought to Supporting Immortals Island from a young age. Many years had passed, and the youngest among them had not interacted with the secular world for close to 20 years. They were expelled from the sect and had nowhere to go. With Ling Feng and the other two leading the way, they naturally followed them. However, Ling Feng and the other two did not tell them that they were under Yu Qianzhou's arrangements. When they heard the conversation between Ling Feng and the gatekeeper and found out that Yu Qianzhou was involved, they looked at each other in astonishment. Seeing such a rich and powerful residence, the three of them could not help but feel a trace of apprehension. They were a little suspicious of Yu Qianzhou's words. The Pillar General was similar to the Wei and Ping generals. The military power of the Wuxia Empire was divided among the three of them. Their status was not something ordinary people could hope to achieve. They had heard of this before and did not believe that Yu Qianzhou would be related to such a person. However, since things had come to this, they could only brace themselves and give it a try. When they heard the shout from inside, the three of them finally heaved a sigh of relief. It was clear that Yu Qianzhou's name was indeed effective. The vermilion-red door of the residence let out a dull sound and quickly opened. 2 rows of servants stood on either side. A handsome young man with a golden crown in his hair and embroidered robes with a jade belt around his waist walked out and looked around joyfully. When he saw the travel-worn appearance of the group, he was slightly taken aback. He paused for a moment before asking doubtfully, I am Shi Xiaotian. Are you all looking for me? When he heard the servant's report, he did not think much of it. He felt that the servant was looking down on him. At this moment, he also suspected that these people were sent by that person. Otherwise, why would they be in such a sorry state? After being in a rich and powerful family for so long, he had forgotten how he looked when he returned from Anquangsung. He was even worse than them. The expression of the servant who went to report sank. They had actually lied to him. They grew up overseas and did not have much experience. This was the first time they saw such a dignified young master. Looking at themselves, they felt a little resentful. Ling Feng cupped his fist and said, "You are sure Xiaotian. It is Uncle Master Yu Qianchou who ordered us to find you." "Uncle Master?" Shi Xiaotian looked him up and down. He seemed to be slightly older than Yu Qianchou. He was a little worried, so he probed, "Where are you from?" "Supporting Immortals Island," Ling Feng said with a little pride. As soon as he said this, everyone became confident. Although they were expelled from the sect, the position of the sect was enough for them to be proud of. The name of the number one sect in the cultivation world was not just for show. Sure sect of sect. Of the sect of the other sect. Excited. Sure sect out of the sect disciples sect of the sect of the sect of the other of sect. As he spoke, he looked at the servants on both sides, extended his hand, and made an inviting gesture. "This is not the place to talk. Everyone, please follow me." The decency of a wealthy family in the secular world was indeed a big blow to these people. It was a completely different concept from the fairyland of the Supporting Immortals Island. Perhaps it was because they had stayed in the Supporting Immortals Island for a long time, but their sense of beauty had completely changed. They were a little surprised by the luxury of the general's residence. They constantly looked around and praised in their hearts. Shi Xiaotian didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest. Not only did he lead the way, he also kept making inviting gestures. Sometimes, the servants passing by couldn't help but glance at him. Why was the third young master so polite to a bunch of country bumpkins? The former led everyone to the back garden where Yu Qianchou used to live. However, it had become his residence now, and the garden was still a forbidden area. Other than him, no one was allowed to enter. In the small courtyard of the back garden, the pile of spirit stones that Yu Qianchou left for him was still there. Even though everyone came from the world's number one cultivation sect, they had never seen such a big pile of spirit stones before. Moreover, these were just some ordinary disciples. They were all speechless. As expected of a wealthy family, even the spirit stones were exposed so casually. However, they didn't know Shi Xiaotian's pain. Seeing these spirit stones every day was torture to him. In the cultivation world, it was a good thing, but in the secular world, people would have to think twice before exchanging it for a meal. Moreover, Shi Xiaotian hadn't built his foundation, so he didn't dare to absorb the spiritual energy inside. Normally, he only dared to look at it but didn't dare to use it. After inviting the guests from the Supporting Immortals Island to sit in the hall, Shi Xiaotian impatiently asked Ling Feng, "Old. Why didn't your martial uncle Yu come? What did he ask you to bring me?" The first thing that came to his mind was the foundation building pill. Ling Feng told him what Yu Qianchou wanted him to find Shi Xiaotian. Then, he took out the porcelain bottle that he carefully kept and gave it to Shi Xiaotian. Once Shi Xiaotian received it, he immediately opened the seal and poured the contents into his palm a few times. However, he realized that there was nothing inside. He couldn't help but look at Ling Feng in confusion. Ling Feng and the other two's expressions changed as well. It was actually an empty bottle. Yu Qianchou actually asked them to bring an empty bottle as a gift? Shi Xiaotian squinted his eyes and looked into the bottle. There was indeed nothing inside. He then put it under his nose and sniffed it. He couldn't help but frown. There was nothing inside other than the smell of blood. He slowly raised his head and looked at the crowd. He said indifferently, "What is the meaning of this?" Are you trying to fool me? Or is the thing inside the bottle being hidden by someone? Give me an explanation. He had been a person of status for a long time. When he was serious, he could indeed put some pressure on others. The atmosphere in the hall became heavy. The other disciples also looked at Ling Feng and the other two. Ling Feng snatched the bottle from his hand. After checking it again, he realized that there was nothing inside. He muttered, "How can this be? I've never opened the bottle before. Could it be that martial uncle you gave us an empty bottle? He came all the way here to deliver such a small empty bottle? Do you really think I'm an idiot?" Shi Xiaotian glanced at everyone coldly and said in a deep voice, "I think everyone should first prove your identity. Otherwise, my general's residence isn't a place that you can come and go as you please. Speak. Who are you people? How do you know that I know you, Qianzhou?" He shouted. "Yo! I haven't seen you for a few years. Your temper has grown." Suddenly, a mocking voice came from the back of the hall. Shi Xiaotian suddenly turned around and shouted, "Who is it? Get out here." Following a burst of laughter, a person swayed out from the back of the hall. He stared at Shi Xiaotian with a smile and sighed. "You have guts. You actually dare to speak to me like this. Why? Can't you recognize my voice after being separated for a few years?" Ah! Everyone stood up. This person wasn't a stranger to everyone. He was a famous person on Supporting Immortals Island. He was once an honored guest of the State Pillar General's residence. He was Yu Qianzhou. All the disciples bowed and said, "Martial Uncle Yu." Ling Feng and the other two looked at him in disbelief. Wasn't he on Supporting Immortals Island? How did he come here in a blink of an eye? Boss. Shi Xiaotian said in shock. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand to indicate that there was no need to be so polite. He turned to Shi Xiaotian and patted his shoulder with a smile. "Young man, you have quite a temper. How dare you shout at me?" I. Shi Xiaotian stuttered for a long time. In the end, he bowed with a surprised expression. "Boss." Yu Qianzhou turned around with a smile. He walked to the chair in the main hall and sat down. He looked at everyone. Chapter 138. Seeing everyone's doubtful expressions, Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly. In fact, he had already heard the conversation between him and Shi Xiaotian. His gaze landed on the porcelain bottle in Ling Feng's hand, and his smile widened. He had been cultivating arduously for more than a year, trying to make various breakthroughs. One time, he had cultivated the Guiyuan sword technique, wanting to make a breakthrough, but in his anxiety, he had ended up injuring himself. When he returned to Supporting Immortal Island, he realized that there were bloodstains on his clothes, so he casually tossed them down the Alchemy Pavilion's mountain and did not take it to heart. A few days later, when he was cultivating in Utopia, he unintentionally realized that he could sense the scene in an unfamiliar place outside. This feeling could only be felt when he had entered Utopia the last time. Curious, he locked onto it with his divine sense and tried using the method to exit. In the end, he discovered that he was already in the back mountain of the Alchemy Pavilion. When he discovered the blood-stained shirt that he had abandoned previously, he immediately thought of a possibility. He reckoned that it was a benefit brought about by his cultivation breaking through again. Therefore, he dripped his blood in several places on Supporting Immortal Island to test it out. Indeed, he could easily sense the surroundings of every drop of blood essence in Utopia. After repeated attempts, he could use Utopia as a medium to quickly appear where there was blood essence. The porcelain bottle that he had asked Ling Feng and the other two to bring did not contain anything other than a drop of his blood essence. His main purpose was to test Utopia's long-distance teleportation ability. He had asked the three of them to bring that drop of blood essence to the National Pillar General's residence, which was why he could appear here. Of course, this was his secret, and it was not convenient for him to let the people in front of him know. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Ling Feng and the other two and said indifferently, Ling Feng, I remember the three of you saying that as long as I can help you succeed in building your foundation, you'll be willing to listen to my orders. Does that still count? The three of them looked at each other and thought about how Yu Qianzhou had been able to leave supporting Immortal Island secretly and appear here silently. Since he had such means, he was definitely not lying about building his foundation. Therefore, they bowed in unison and said, of course it counts. The other disciples were shocked when they heard that Yu Qianzhou could actually help the three of them build their foundation. For a moment, everyone's thoughts became active, and they looked at the three of them enviously. Shi Xiaotian was also a little excited. Since Boss had the ability to help them build their foundations, he would naturally be able to help himself. However, he had been with Yu Qianzhou for more than a year and was very familiar with him. He knew that there was more to this sentence. Yu Qianzhou nodded. He looked at the others and smiled, what are your plans? Are you willing to serve me like the other three? Everyone looked at each other, their expressions becoming excited. Someone stepped forward and bowed, saying, Martial Uncle Yu, if you can guarantee that this disciple will successfully build his foundation, this disciple is willing to listen to Martial Uncle's orders. I always pay what I say. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, if you can't successfully build your foundation, you naturally don't need to listen to my orders, and you also don't need to take my words seriously. Go do what you need to do. Ha! Is there anyone among you who is willing to be like him? As he said that, he took out a few foundation building pills that were shrouded in purple mist. Everyone's eyes lit up. Apart from Shi Xiaotian, everyone had seen them before, so they naturally knew that these were foundation building pills. Shi Xiaotian also naturally understood from everyone's gazes. In an instant, the crowd's emotions flared up. Who wouldn't want to make such a foolproof deal? Even if they couldn't successfully build their foundation, they wouldn't lose anything. They immediately stepped forward and bowed, saying, if we can successfully build our foundation, this disciple is willing to listen to Martial Uncle Yu's orders. Since there were foundation building pills, Boss definitely wouldn't forget about them. Shi Xiaotian stood at the side very confidently, not saying a word. Good, good, good. Yu Qianzhou said with a smile, but he snorted coldly in his heart. As expected, they were all people who refused to suffer losses. Each of them emphasized that they would only listen to his orders after they successfully built their foundation. They all thought that he was a philanthropist. Very good. He placed the few foundation building pills in his hand on the tea table beside him, then he took out a whole bunch and placed them on the table, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, words are no proof. Those who are willing to listen to my orders will first take one as proof. If one foundation building pill is not enough, you can still come to me to take it. As he said that, he took out another handful from his storage bag. Shi Xiaotian's jaw dropped as he watched. He thought to himself, Boss is indeed boss. The foundation building pills that An Kuangceng treats as treasure are actually given out by Boss as wedding candies. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Finally, someone couldn't resist the temptation and walked over to Yu Qianzhou and bowed deeply. When the latter nodded, he excitedly took one and retreated to the side, as if he was afraid that someone would snatch it from him. Sometimes, one was afraid that no one would take the lead. Since someone took the lead, everyone would naturally follow suit, taking turns to bow and salute, then unceremoniously took the pills and retreated. In the blink of an eye, there were only 11 foundation building pills left on the tea table. Yu Qianzhou looked at Shi Xiaotian, Ling Feng, and the other two who didn't follow the crowd's bad example. He smiled and said, Xiaotian, take the foundation building pills on the table and share them with those three brothers. 4 people actually had to share 11 foundation building pills. Everyone's face was filled with envy. Yes. Such a good thing, Xiaotian couldn't hold back the smile on his face anymore. He couldn't help but stick out his tongue, no longer looking like a noble young master. Holding the foundation-building pills in his hand, he walked in front of Ling Feng and the other two. Without saying a word, he gave each of them 3 foundation-building pills. He held 2 and was about to retreat. Who knew that the 3 of them wouldn't take it? They each wanted to give one to Xiaotian, but the latter was determined not to accept it. Looking at the adult version of Kong Rong, Yu Qianzhou felt a toothache. This daddy here has plenty of foundation-building pills, why do I need you guys to be good people? His face darkened and he shouted, "All right, stop being disgusting." The 4 of them retreated embarrassedly. Yu Qianzhou stood up and looked around at everyone. Expressionlessly, he said, "I don't like empty promises. The foundation-building pills in everyone's hands are proof of my advance payment. But, you guys can't just say empty promises. You have to show me some sincerity. What do you guys say?" Everyone looked at each other. They were all disciples who were chased out of Fuxian Island. Other than the pitiful amount of spirit stones they had, they really couldn't take out anything else to show their sincerity. They didn't know what to say. There really wasn't a free lunch in this world. Xiaotian looked at the foundation-building pills in his hand. His face twitched unnaturally. Just as he took a step forward and called out, Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, "We'll talk about the 4 of you later." Ha! Nobody said anything. Yu Qianzhou crossed his arms in front of his chest and smiled. "Then I'll take the initiative to ask you guys for something. Something that all of you have, how about it? Something that everyone has?" Everyone looked at themselves and suddenly felt a chill run down their spines. A disciple came out and bowed. "Uncle Master Yu, I wonder what we have that can catch your eye?" "Huh. Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not interested in your body parts. I just want something that doesn't matter. For example." Yu Qianzhou paused and smiled. "For example, give me your natal primordial spirit. With this proof, I can be at ease." "What?" everyone exclaimed. Their faces turned pale. If they handed over their natal primordial spirit, wouldn't their lives be in danger? That disciple bowed again and said, "Uncle Master, you're joking too much. If that's the case, then I don't want this foundation-building pill anymore." As he spoke, he walked to the side of the tea table and returned the foundation establishment pill. Then, a few more people gritted their teeth and walked out to return the foundation-building pill. The rest of them were obviously hesitant. Yu Qianzhou looked at them coldly and suddenly laughed. "You guys really don't stand on ceremony. You guys take my things as you please and return them as you please. Since you guys don't stand on ceremony, then I won't stand on ceremony either. Humph. All of you who took my foundation-building pill, leave your natal primordial spirit behind. Don't even think about leaving." Just as he finished speaking, among the people who were still holding onto the foundation-building pill, someone suddenly leaped out of the hall. In the blink of an eye, he was about to jump over the wall. It seemed like he wanted to escape with the pill. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly and narrowed his eyes. Chapter 139. Clang! A cold light suddenly flashed in front of everyone's eyes, heading straight for the disciple who was about to jump over the wall. The cold light pierced through the person's figure, causing a flower of blood to blossom in the air. The disciple lost his balance and let out a miserable scream that echoed throughout the general's residence. Before the scream had even subsided, a second, third, fourth, one after another, cold lights flashed out from the hall. Their target was still the disciple who was still in the air. Nearly 100 cold lights swarmed over like a flock of crows fighting for food. In a few blinks of an eye, the scream stopped and the disciple could no longer be seen. All that could be seen was a bloody mist in the air. The cold lights were faintly discernible, and occasionally, pieces of cloth would fall. Suddenly, nearly 100 cold lights seemed to have received an order and shot out from the bloody mist, shooting into the hall. Everyone followed the direction of the cold lights, and one by one, they entered the storage pouch on Yu Qianzhou's waist. One of the cold lights slowed down and turned into a flying sword that flew around Yu Qianzhou's body. After a few rounds, it flipped over and with a clang sound, it went straight into the sword sheath on Yu Qianzhou's back. Heavens! Only now did everyone realize that the nearly 100 cold lights were all flying swords. They had never seen anyone control so many flying swords at once. A gust of wind blew outside, causing the leaves on the trees in the courtyard to rustle. Everyone looked over and saw the bloody mist being blown away by the wind. The scattered pieces of cloth on the ground were blown away, and the walls were dyed with a layer of blood. A thought flashed through everyone's mind. Not a single corpse left. Yu Qianzhou stared at the blood stains on the wall and the pieces of cloth on the ground. He felt slightly regretful. The power of these 100 flying swords was far from what he had imagined. Otherwise, there shouldn't be any blood stains and pieces of cloth left behind. They should have all been turned into ashes. What happened just now, although it was said to be slow, it was actually only a matter of a few moments. The hall became completely silent. None of the disciples dared to make a sound. They were all intimidated by the power of the group of swords. Those who had the same thought turned pale and completely gave up. They knew that there was no way they could escape this kind of attack. Was this the power of a foundation establishment cultivator? Shi Xiaotian looked at the silent Yu Qianzhou and clenched his fists tightly. His face was flushed and he was actually trembling with excitement. The goal that the two of them had been fighting for many years had been realized by boss before him. Who dares to fight here? Do you want to die? A loud shout rang out, and then 7 figures appeared on the courtyard wall. 7 middle-aged men in plain robes with sharp eyes stood on the wall of the courtyard and observed the situation inside. Do you want to die? Yu Qianzhou was slightly annoyed. 7 cold rays of light shot out from his storage bag at lightning speed towards the 7 of them. Shi Xiaotian suddenly shouted, "Boss, help!" The 7 flying swords were pressed against the throats of those 7 people. If Shi Xiaotian had not shouted in time, there would have been a bloody hole in their necks. The faces of the 7 people on the wall immediately turned ashen, not daring to move. How could a person who could use a flying sword be ordinary? Yu Qianzhou coldly stared at Shi Xiaotian. The latter smiled bitterly and begged, "Boss, please let them go. They are not ordinary servants, they are the retainers of the general's estate. They have been loyal to my family for generations and are my father's most trusted subordinates. They have been protecting the safety of the estate and my family for a long time. They didn't mean to offend you, boss." Yu Qianzhou thought about it and felt that it made sense. They had probably rushed over after hearing that disciple's scream. He looked back at the 7 people on the wall and saw that they were all standing there, giving off the airs of heroes. However, their faces were pale from fear. He nodded slightly and said, "Tell them not to tell anyone about what happened here." The 7 cold rays of light returned to his storage bag. "Don't worry, boss. They will know even if you don't tell them." Shi Xiaotian turned around and walked into the courtyard. He cupped his hands towards the 7 people on the wall and said, "7 uncles, please leave. There is nothing wrong here, don't worry." The 7 of them also knew the rules of the estate. No one was allowed to come here. If they hadn't heard the scream, they wouldn't have rushed over. The leader in the middle looked at the bloodstains at his feet. He looked at Yu Qianzhou who was sitting high up in the hall and bowed to Shi Xiaotian, "Third young master, be careful. We will leave first." The 7 of them returned to the courtyard. This was just a small episode. When Shi Xiaotian turned around and returned to the hall, he was instantly stunned. There was a big group of people just now, but now, only Yu Qianzhou and Ling Feng were left. Ling Feng and the other two looked at Yu Qianzhou in shock. Just now, Yu Qianzhou's figure flashed through the crowd, and everywhere he went, people disappeared into thin air. More than 10 people disappeared just like that. They could see it clearly, but they were confused by it. Ling Feng pointed at the place where the people disappeared and said in shock, "Martial uncle, don't worry, they are fine. I just sent them to another place." Yu Qianzhou smiled. These people were all Chen Feng's assistants. Otherwise, it would be difficult for Chen Feng to guarantee the logistics of the small army alone. After sending them to Utopia, his sister would naturally control their natal primordial spirits first. "Martial uncle, this. The three of them clearly found it hard to accept this reality. "Alright, you don't have to call me martial uncle anymore. Just call me boss like little Tian." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand. "Moreover, I have already reached the core formation stage. Calling me martial uncle is a bit outdated. I should be calling you Grandmaster. But you are no longer disciples of Fuxian Island, so you can forget about calling me Grandmaster. Just call me boss." The four of them were stunned. He had already reached the core formation stage? Shi Xiaotian said in surprise, "Boss, you have really reached the core formation stage?" Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes at him and waved his hand. "Let's not talk about this. While I am here, I can protect you. The four of you should hurry up and build your foundation. After that, I have something for you to do." The four of them nodded in surprise and sat down cross-legged in the hall. They consumed the pills and focused on refining them. Not long after, the painful process of building their foundation gradually appeared on the four of them. Yu Qianzhou sat down at the side and looked at the four of them silently. He already had plans for the four of them. He needed them to run around and do some things for him outside. As long as they did not enter Utopia, there was no need to strip away their natal primordial spirits. Otherwise, it would be easy for people with high cultivation levels to see through them. As for Shi Xiaotian, he had entered Utopia once, but he had been trapped in an array and did not know anything. Among the four of them, Shi Xiaotian was the most talented. Yu Qianzhou gave him another foundation establishment pill and he succeeded in building his foundation with only 3. Although Ling Feng and Bei Zi had succeeded with 3 pills each, they had also used 3 pills on the supporting immortal island. Lu Xianping, on the other hand, had to use 5 pills to succeed. Shi Xiaotian did not say anything. After Ling Feng and Bei Zi succeeded, they tried their best to suppress their excitement. They knelt in front of Yu Qianzhou and said some words of gratitude. Xianping, who succeeded in the end, kowtowed 3 times without saying a word. Then, Shi Xiaotian led the 3 of them to wash up and stood in front of Yu Qianzhou in high spirits. Ling Feng and the other 2 looked at Yu Qianzhou as if they were looking at their parents again. It was difficult for outsiders to understand their feelings of being pulled back from the brink of despair. However, this was what Yu Qianzhou needed after years of planning. "This is a storage bag for you." Yu Qianzhou threw a bag to Shi Xiaotian. When Shi Xiaotian caught it, he was stunned at first. Then, he burst into laughter and thanked him profusely. "Thank you, boss. Thank you, boss." He had been drooling over this legendary item for a long time. "What are you laughing at?" Yu Qianzhou's words immediately made him stand to the side, but he still kept touching the bag in his hand. Yu Qianzhou tapped his finger on the tea table beside him and pointed at the 4 jade archives, 4 large porcelain bottles, and 4 swords on the table. The jade disc contains supporting immortal island supporting immortal sword technique, and the bottle contains vitality pills. Each of you, take them and cultivate diligently. Don't be lazy. The 4 of them were pleasantly surprised. They had just built their foundation, and now, Yu Qianzhou had prepared everything they needed. Where else could they find such a good boss? The 4 of them took their things and thanked him profusely. Shi Xiaotian laughed so hard that he almost fainted. He hugged the pile of things, his mouth wide open. Happiness came too suddenly, and there was nothing he could do about it. However, he did not notice that Yu Qianzhou's expression gradually darkened when he saw Shi Xiaotian's behavior. Chapter 140. Ling Feng tugged at him, and Shi Xiaotian immediately reacted. He smiled awkwardly and placed the items in his hands into his storage pouch. Frivolous. Yu Qianzhou harumphed and looked at them for a while before saying, "There are some things I need you to do. Ling Feng, the three of you will stay here for now. Once your cultivation reaches a certain level, the three of you will split up and travel around the Wuxia Empire, cultivating while traveling. First, to broaden your horizons, and second, to gather some disciples with spiritual roots. Don't worry about what I do. In short, as long as they are not affiliated with any sect, regardless of their age, bring them all here. The more the better, I have a use for them. Remember, try to keep a low profile and don't let the other sects find out. Oh right, if you don't have any money in the secular world, you can ask little Tian for it. I believe the general's mansion is not short of money. This is what I want the three of you to do, don't slack off." Shi Xiaotian's face twitched unnaturally. Ling Feng and the other two looked at each other. Traveling and cultivating at the same time, there was actually such a good thing. However, from Yu Qianzhou's expression, it seemed like this matter was very important. They immediately cupped their fists and said, "Boss, we understand." Yu Qianzhou nodded and took out 4 small silver balls. He passed them to the 4 and said, "These are hollow inside. I have placed something inside. If you encounter danger outside and can't save yourself, you can use your divine sense to check. When the time comes, someone will come to save you. Remember to keep it well." Something that could save lives was indeed a good thing. The 4 carefully kept it. Shi Xiaotian looked at the 3 of them. It seemed like they had all been assigned tasks, except for him. This was too much of a blow to his confidence. He couldn't help but ask, "Boss, what should I do?" "You?" Yu Qianzhou glanced at him and said coldly, "Go do what you need to do. Do your old profession." Shi Xiaotian was startled and said, "Boss, what old profession do I have?" "Yes, why not?" Yu Qianzhou patted his shoulder and said, "Your matter is very important. You should use your identity as the general's 3rd young master to befriend the nobles in the capital. Don't neglect eating, drinking, and playing." Ling Feng and the other 2 turned their heads to the side. Shi Xiaotian's face darkened, and he said stiffly, "Boss, you call this a very important matter?" "Yes, very important." Yu Qianzhou glared fiercely at him, his expression solemn as he said, "I want you to thoroughly investigate all the officials of the 5th rank and above in the Wuxia Empire, as well as their families. Then, record everything down for me." As he spoke, he handed several jade archives to Miao Yi. "Ah!" Shi Xiaotian took the jade archive and stood rooted to the ground. A thought flashed through his mind. Was boss planning to rebel? Otherwise, why would a cultivator want this thing? Seeing his expression, Yu Qianzhou knew what he was thinking. He smiled and said, "Don't think too much. It's not what you think. You'll know when the time comes. Alright, I still have some matters to attend to. Just do as I say." Hearing his words, Shi Xiaotian felt relieved. He cupped his fists at Ling Feng and the other 2 and said, "Understood." Another night passed, and the sky outside was already beginning to brighten. Yu Qianzhou walked into the courtyard, and the long sword on his back was unsheathed with a chong sound. With his hands behind his back, he turned into a streak of light and flew away. The 4 who were sending him off were fascinated by the sight. Shi Xiaotian even cried out, "Boss, you're too awesome. This won't do. I must learn this as soon as possible." On a mountaintop on the outskirts of the capital, Yu Qianzhou stood silently for a long while. His body was already drenched from the dew. At this moment, the rays of the rising sun were so blinding that he had to close his eyes. He stood there, waiting for the sun to rise. Everything was bathed in a layer of gold. He turned to look at the densely populated capital of Wuxia, and mumbled, "So many beauties have fallen to the hands of countless heroes. Since the heavens sent me here, I'd be letting myself down if I don't do something. Xiaotian, if you were to sit on the throne one day, I wonder how you'd feel." Facing the rising sun, he stretched lazily. Thinking about the place he was going to, he couldn't help but feel a little excited. Time really passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it had been almost 10 years. He wondered how his father, who had helped him clean up the murder scene, was doing. And that crybaby mother. Yu Qianzhou grinned, and a hint of anticipation appeared on his face. He unsheathed his long sword and left with him. In a small forest outside Swallow City, Yu Qianzhou took a look at the surroundings. It seemed like this was the place where he had opened his eyes back then. He slowly walked out, and walked toward the ancient city gate where people and carriages came and went. It was very familiar, and not much had changed. It was still the same. It was rare for him to come out, and now that he could use the kinesis flight technique, transportation was much more convenient. This time, he wanted to go home to take a look. Walking on the streets of Swallow City, there were all kinds of shops, and it was a bustling scene. Yu Qianzhou sighed with emotion as he relived this familiar scene. Suddenly, he realized that many people were looking at him with strange gazes. He thought to himself, "It's impossible that they know me. I left home at the age of 16, and it's been almost 10 years since then. My appearance has changed a lot." Thinking about it, he felt relieved. It was probably because he was carrying a sword on his back and carrying a bag on his waist that looked a little weird. If he had known earlier, he would have kept it first. He came to a stop in front of a rich and powerful mansion. The plaque on the door read, "Yu Manor," in gold. He had finally arrived home. Looking at the bright and clean appearance of the house, it was obvious that there were no signs of decline. It was easy to imagine that the family head here had taken good care of the whole house. Climbing up the steps, just as he was about to enter, he saw the servant guarding the door walk out and block him with hostility. He shouted, "Where did you come from, evil person?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He was actually blocked by a servant when he entered his own house. His gaze followed the servant's gaze and landed on the hilt of the sword on his back. *CK. A person carrying a sword is an evil person? Isn't this servant's foresight a little too bad? What's wrong with father? Why did he choose such a person to guard the door? Damn it, you even dare to block the eldest young master's way. I'll fire you later. Just as he was about to lose his temper, he remembered that this was his own house. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile. I didn't think that after leaving home for almost 10 years, I wouldn't even be able to enter the house. Who are you? I remember that Uncle Fu used to be the gatekeeper. Hearing him say this, the servant was stunned as well. He looked him up and down, and only then did he realize that there was some resemblance between his brows and the old master's. Bewildered, he asked, You're the eldest young master? I am. Yu Qianzhou nodded and smiled. He then asked, Who are you? I haven't seen you before. I. Only now did the servant realize that he had provoked the eldest young master. He stuttered for a while before bowing and saying, Uncle Fu is my father, this little one is Fu Qing. Saying this, he quickly opened the door and said, Eldest young master, please come in. As soon as he finished speaking, Fu Qing ran into the mansion while shouting, Eldest young master is back, eldest young master is back. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Damn it! Why did he have to be so ostentatious? Then he shook his head with a bitter smile and walked in. The result of Fu Qing's loud shout was that the richest mansion in Swallow City immediately boiled over. Yu Qianzhou walked through the porch and came to the courtyard. He saw a group of people coming out of the main hall. He could vaguely recognize some of them as relatives of his family. The man and woman standing at the front were none other than his father and mother. Yu Qianzhou was a little excited. He strode forward and knelt down in front of the two. He kowtowed 3 times and said, "Son." Yu Qianzhou greets father and mother. Chapter 141. 2 pairs of hands helped him up. It was his parents. The family of 3 looked at each other. Yu Changui, whose sideburns already had some gray hair, held his arm and patted his shoulder, saying, "It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back." Shui Ernyang threw herself into his arms and started crying. She wailed, "It's all your father's fault. My son has been gone for so many years." Yu Qianzhou scratched his head and awkwardly looked at his father, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He then pushed Shui Ernyang away and said, "Mother, don't cry. I'm back now." Yu Changgui's eyes were a little red. He pulled his wife away from his son and said, "What are you doing? Why are you crying as soon as your son is back? Aren't you purposely making your son worry?" Shui Ernyang struggled free and pulled Yu Qianzhou. She cried, It's good that you're back. You have to save your younger brother. You have to save your younger brother." The crying stopped abruptly. Shui Ernyang was so sad that she fainted. Yu Qianzhou was shocked. He quickly held his mother and carried her. He walked towards his parents' room with familiarity. The group of people followed behind him. When they reached his parents' room, he placed his mother on the bed. He grabbed his mother's hands and infused 2 streams of vital energy into his mother's body, quickly dispersing the pent-up air in her chest. Shui Ernyang slowly woke up. When she saw Yu Qianzhou, she started crying again. She was already crying like this. If she cried any more, she would hurt her spirit. Yu Qianzhou immediately placed a finger on his mother's forehead. Shui Ernyang immediately fell asleep. Yu Qianzhou heaved a sigh of relief and shouted, "Someone." A young maidservant looked at the silent old master and trembled as she walked to Yu Qianzhou's side and said timidly, "Eldest young master." Yu Qianzhou took out an origin chi pill and handed it to her. "When madam wakes up, dissolve this pill in a bowl of warm water and feed it to madam. Don't forget." The maid quickly complied. Yu Changui had been doing business for so many years. At this time, his attention had always been on his son. He saw that his son was nimble in ordering people around. His expression and behavior vaguely had the aura of a superior. He also had a few methods to treat his wife. Obviously, he had lived a good life outside. When he left, he was only 16 years old. Now, his bearing was steady and his face resolute. The immaturity of the past had faded, and he was already an adult. "Is your mother okay?" "I'm fine. I'm just a little sad. I'll be fine after taking some medicine." Yu Qianzhou stood up and turned around. He stared at his father and frowned. "Father, did I hear wrongly? Mother seemed to have asked me to save my younger brother. What's going on?" He didn't know that in the 2nd year after he left, after giving birth to her first child, Shui Ernyang, who had been infertile for many years, actually gave birth to a younger brother. Yu Changui sighed. His eldest son left, but God gave him a younger son. It could be said that it was God's will. But this matter of the clam-forming pearls was really a little difficult to talk about in front of his son. "Father, what's wrong? Is there something inconvenient to tell your son?" Yu Qianzhou was a little unhappy. Yu Changui shook his head and smiled bitterly. He slowly explained the cause of the matter. "In the 2nd year after you left, your mother gave birth to a younger brother. His name is Yu Wuchou. He is now 8 years old. But a few days ago, your younger brother suddenly disappeared. Yesterday, someone sent a letter saying that your younger brother had been kidnapped by them. They wanted us to prepare 10,000 taels of gold and come to collect it today. Yu Qianzhou nodded his head in acknowledgement. He indeed didn't expect to have a younger brother. But the two of them had been married for a long time. When he left, they weren't even 40 years old. It wasn't strange for them to have another child. But what was wrong with the Yu clan's descendants? The eldest was kidnapped once, and now the second was kidnapped again. Were the Yu clan's descendants so easy to kidnap? Who knew if there would be more thieves? It seems like the Yu clan's wealth is something that people are jealous of. Mother's maiden family has no one left. I wonder if our Yu clan's relatives, hee. It's really hard to say. I believe father isn't a foolish person and should have some idea. Yu Qianzhou sneered. Just now, he seemed to have seen a large group of Yu clan's relatives. When they saw him, some of them had strange expressions. Yu Changui said in a gloomy tone, I already had my suspicions. Some people probably think that I only know how to do business and not kill people. I know you're not a good person. Otherwise, your business wouldn't be so big. Yu Qianzhou smirked and asked, did the kidnappers report their names? No. Yu Changui shook his head and said, they said that they will send someone to check on the ransom today and tell them the location of the transaction. When the time comes, they will hand over the kidnappers. As he spoke, he suddenly stared at his son and asked, Qianzhou, you've been cultivating for so many years. Have you learned any immortal techniques? I didn't cultivate. That's what soul formation cultivators do. We're just cultivators. Yu Qianzhou smiled. There was no need to tell such words to his father. Of course, he knew what his father was thinking, and it was none other than him trying to utilize some immortal techniques to rescue Chen Hao. He didn't answer directly and said, Father, don't worry. As long as my brother is fine, I guarantee that you won't have to pay a single cent and my brother will come back safely. Yu Changui nodded happily. The father and son chatted as they walked out of the bedroom. When they came to the courtyard outside, there was a large group of clan members and servants standing there. Seeing the father and son come out, an old man in the middle who seemed to be the oldest asked, Changui, how is second mother? Do you need to call a doctor? Yu Changui bowed and said, thank you for asking, clan leader. Second mother is just a little sad. She will be fine after a good sleep. Qianzhou, come and greet clan leader. Yu Qianzhou didn't have a good impression of this group of clan members. In his memory, his father lost his parents and was extremely poor. None of the clan members helped him. Later on, his father received help from his mother's family and relied on his own hard work to have such a large business today. As a result, this group of clan members flocked to him like ducks after hearing the news. They were really powerful. However, the Chinese had a strong sense of clan. Yu Qianzhou didn't want his father to be embarrassed, so he walked over and bowed. Yu Qianzhou greets clan leader. The clan leader nodded and said, I heard that you went out to learn martial arts in the past. I wonder what martial arts you learned. Have you returned after completing your martial arts? Look at the sword on your back. Did you learn some martial arts? Yu Qianzhou knew that his parents didn't spread the news of his cultivation. He smiled indifferently and said, I didn't learn anything practical. I just went out for a walk. I happened to know that some cowardly scoundrels wanted to harm my family, so I specially bought this sword to deter them. The clan leader stroked his long beard and said, very good. He didn't say anything else. However, a middle-aged man beside him walked to Yu Changui's side and said darkly, Brother Changui, I've seen eldest brother's son in the past. Why does he look nothing like him now? Your family is rich, so you have to be careful. What he meant was to tell Yu Changui that his youngest son had just been kidnapped. His eldest son, whom he hadn't heard from for many years, was here. Furthermore, there was a difference in his appearance. Be careful that someone had designs on your family's wealth. Brother, don't worry. He's definitely my eldest son. Yu Changui replied in a deep voice. In her heart, she was a little unhappy. How could her own son not know? Not to mention anything else, just based on the fact that her son could say, "Mother's maiden family has no one left, I don't know are you family's ancestral relatives." These words were known to the heavens, the earth, you, and I, and only the person involved could understand the profound meaning behind it. It was clear that this was undoubtedly her eldest son. Moreover, as a father, how could he not know the minute details of his son's appearance? Father, who is this elder? Yu Qianqiu looked at that person with interest and asked. Chapter 142. Qianqiu, don't be rude. This is the patriarch's eldest son, Yu Zhongping. In terms of seniority, he is your uncle. Yu Changui reprimanded. Oh. So it's uncle. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, Qianqiu greets uncle. I hope uncle doesn't blame nephew for being rude. However, nephew deeply agrees with uncle's words. There must be someone coveting my family's wealth. Nephew firmly believes that there must be a mole in the Yu family, colluding with those villains outside. Otherwise, my younger brother wouldn't have been captured so easily with a few strong subordinates. Uncle, don't you think so? He seemed to be extremely respectful on the surface, yet anyone could discern the targeted intent in his tone. It was as if Yu Zhongping was the mole, and it caused the expressions of the surrounding people to become extremely strange. Yu Zhongping's face twitched as he sternly said, "What do you mean by that?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at his father and saw that he had actually turned his head to the side as if he didn't hear anything. This further confirmed his guess and he couldn't help but laugh, heh. Uncle, don't misunderstand. It's nothing. I just want to tell everyone as the Yu family's eldest son that since I'm back, anyone who dares to stretch their claws into my family must be prepared to be beheaded. Even if it's the heavenly emperor, heh. I won't let a single one of them go. At the end of his words, the chill in his voice was unmistakable. Yu Zhongping still wanted to say something but was stopped by his father, the Yu family's patriarch. He only heard him say with a smile, "Eldest brother is right. If it's really a family thief, we can't let a single one of them go." Yu Qianqiu smiled and saluted him. Patriarch is indeed worthy of being the patriarch, truly wise. Master. Fu Qing hurriedly walked over and said, "There are 3 people outside barging in. They say they are second young master's ticket holders." Hearing this, the members of the Yu clan immediately started whispering to each other. Everyone knew that the so-called owner of the ticket was naturally the kidnapper. To actually dare to barge into the Yu clan in broad daylight, his guts were truly too great. Yu Changui's expression changed, and he hurriedly walked towards the courtyard. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly. His father was anxious to save his son and had lost his usual calmness. Thereupon the group of people followed him. In the main hall courtyard, 3 burly men saw a group of people coming, but they still stood there with their heads held high. Sure enough, they had the style of kidnappers who wanted money more than their lives. Yu Changui calmed himself down, walked over and cupped his fists. "I am Yu Changui, may I know which mountain the 3 heroes are from?" A rough-looking man on the left cupped his fists and said, "Well said." Seeing that Lord Yu is a man who understands the rules, I won't waste any more time. As he spoke, he pointed at the middle-aged man with a gloomy expression and said, "This is our octagonal stronghold's second leader Wang. Today, he's here to compete with Elder Yu's faction. Gong against gong, we'll be counting the tickets face to face." The so-called counting tickets was to let the victim confirm whether the kidnapper was his man or not. Then, the kidnapper would confirm whether the victim was sincere in redeeming the ticket. If there was no sincerity, then the hostage might be killed. Yu Qianzhou slightly narrowed his eyes. Ha! Octagonal stronghold again. This daddy almost forgot to settle the score with you guys. Today, you guys came to remind me. Very good. Second leader Wang. Yu Changui cupped his fists. The second leader Wang in the middle did not say a word and only nodded to the man on the right. That man took out a jade pendant from his bosom and handed it to Yu Changui. When the latter saw the jade pendant, his body swayed and he almost lost his footing. Obviously, it was his son's possession. The man on the left chuckled and said, "If Lord Yu has verified it, please bring us to see if the 10,000 taels of gold has been prepared." Yu Qianzhou coldly snorted and unhurriedly walked over and said, "A bunch of reckless fools. 10,000 taels of gold, and they still dare to ask for it." As he spoke, he supported his father and walked straight back and said, "Fu Qing, find a chair for master to sit down and rest." The Yu family's group of relatives were somewhat stunned, but since it was none of their business, no one said anything. In the crowd, Yu Zhongping's face flashed with a trace of a sneer. His condescending look immediately angered the two bandits. They immediately reached for the sabers on their waists, wanting to teach Yu Qianzhou a lesson. However, the second leader Wang quickly held them down. When he saw Yu Qianzhou carrying a long sword on his back and a bag on his waist, his pupils fiercely contracted. Fu Qing brought over a chair as instructed. Yu Qianzhou helped his father sit down and said softly, "Father, don't worry for the time being. Leave this matter to me to handle." Yu Changui grabbed his wrist. Yu Qianzhou lightly pushed him away and shook his head, indicating that he didn't need to worry. He turned back to stare at the three bandits and coldly said, 10,000 taels of gold, what can you do if I don't give it to you?" As soon as these words came out, the Yu family's relatives immediately whispered to each other. Wasn't this forcing the kidnappers to kill the hostages? The two bandits who were about to pull out their sabers immediately pulled out their sabers again. Second leader Wang once again held them down and took a deep breath. He didn't dare to be sure before, but now that he heard the other party say such words, he was almost convinced. Second leader Wang took a few steps forward and bowed to Yu Qianzhou. He said in a respectful tone, "Senior is an expert in the cultivation world. It was our fault for offending Senior today. We also don't dare to ask Senior for the 10,000 taels of gold. We will definitely return the people we kidnapped safely. We won't dare to be careless. Please let us go, Senior." The two bandits were immediately stunned. The usually arrogant second leader would actually say such humble words. They wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. The Yu family's relatives were also dumbfounded. How did the kidnappers suddenly apologize? Among the crowd, Yu Changping had an angry expression. Yu Qianzhou sneered and said, "I didn't expect you to be so perceptive. You actually know about the cultivation world. I can let you go, but you have to answer a question first. If I am satisfied with your answer, I will let you go. Otherwise, if you make me unhappy, I will definitely raze your Octagon village to the ground." Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The Octagon village was a place that even the government couldn't raze to the ground. Yu Qianzhou's words were too arrogant. However, what did they mean by the cultivation world? Everyone was confused. Yu Changui, who was sitting on a chair, once again sized up his son's proud back. "Senior, please ask." Second leader Wang bowed respectfully. "Tell me who the Yu family is colluding with. Don't tell me you didn't, or the consequences will be very serious." Yu Qianzhou said lightly. Yu Changping, who was in the crowd, trembled. He looked at his father, the clan leader. This. Second leader Wang had a difficult expression on his face. The rough-looking subordinate behind him walked out, cupped his fists, and said casually, "Young senior, you don't have to make things difficult for our second leader. We can't talk about this. We have our own rules. If we tell you who the client is, then how will our Octagon village be able to maintain its reputation in the future? How will we be able to continue living in the underworld? Before he could finish his words, they heard the sound of a sword ring. Everyone saw a flash of light in front of them, and then the bandit lost his voice on the spot. His head was tossed high into the air, separated from his shoulders. Warm blood spurted from the severed head, and when the blood ran dry, his body swayed and fell to the ground. That light transformed into a flying sword and circled around Yu Qianzhou a few times before returning to its scabbard. Murder! Everyone cried out in shock. Yu Qianzhou turned around and glanced at them. He said coldly, "If you want to die, then scream as loud as you can." Just this sentence alone caused everyone to fall silent. They had just witnessed the flying sword kill someone. Who would dare to go against his words? A certain father and son were shivering in fear. "Brother!" The remaining two bandits cried out in grief. One of them hugged the dead body while second leader Wang hugged his head. He looked at Yu Qianzhou and shouted angrily, "There are rules in the cultivation world. We are not allowed to meddle in worldly affairs. Why did you kill us mortals?" Yu Qianzhou sneered, "Humph. You seem to know quite a lot. How strange. You kidnapped my younger brother, and now you're trying to reason with me? What kind of logic is that? Forget it, I won't be able to get anything out of you. I believe you have a first leader, right? I'd better go to the Octagon village myself." As soon as he finished speaking, nearly 100 cold glints shot out from the storage pouch. Two mournful screams rang out, then stopped abruptly. The cold glints disappeared into the red, and the thick smell of blood spread out along with a bloody mist. The Yu clan's relatives and servants had never seen murder like this. Those who were braver had only seen beheadings at the entrance of the food market. They couldn't bear to watch any longer and turned their heads away to retch. Chapter 143. The cold light receded and the blood mist gradually dissipated. The three bandits had turned into a pool of blood on the ground. Looking at Yu Qianzhou, who was standing with his hands behind his back, everyone shuddered. This was clearly a murderous demon. The thick smell of blood left a deep mark in everyone's heart. "Fu Qing!" Yu Qianzhou called out. The person who was called let out an "ah" and moved over with trembling legs. His chin trembled as he said, "Eldest. Eldest young master." Yu Qianzhou glanced at him and frowned. He shouted, "What are you afraid of? How can you guard the door of my Yu clan with this kind of behavior? Stand properly." Yes, eldest young master." Fu Qing tried his best to suppress his trembling body. "Arrange for people to surround this place. Without my permission, none of the Yu clan's relatives are allowed to leave." As he spoke, a sword appeared in Yu Qianzhou's hand and he handed it to him. He said, "Hold this well. If anyone dares to barge in, kill them with this sword." Seeing him holding the sword in a daze, Yu Qianzhou shouted again, "If anyone dares to barge in, kill them without mercy. If you dare to let even one person go, I will take your head. Do you understand?" "Understood, understood." Fu Qing hurriedly nodded his head. All the relatives looked at each other in dismay, but no one dared to object. The patriarch and his sons' faces were ashen. Yu Qianzhou faced his father and bowed. He said, "Father, please wait a moment. I will go to the Octagon village to bring my brother back. It won't be long before the truth is revealed." Yu Chonggui nodded and said, "Go. Come back quickly. Don't let the relatives wait too long." "Yes, father." Yu Qianzhou bowed respectfully. The long sword behind him shot out with a chong sound and carried him away like a ray of light. Instantly, everyone in the courtyard was dumbfounded. That leisurely flying celestial being was fortunately seen by a group of ordinary people. Someone immediately exclaimed, "Heavens! Big brother is a sword immortal. Ah! Sword immortal. All the relatives whispered to each other. Yu Changui was so excited that he was trembling slightly. He had told his son to go and come back quickly, but he didn't expect that he would use such a shocking method. Did he say something wrong? Sigh. Why did he say go and return quickly? One must know that a sword immortal would never show his true appearance in front of mortals. AI. My son is no longer an ordinary person. I was too abrupt. Fu Qing looked at the sword in his hand with a face full of surprise. Today, he was fortunate enough to be bestowed a sword by a sword immortal. This was a blessing that he had cultivated for 8 lifetimes. He held the sword with both hands and walked over to Yu Zhanggui. He asked respectfully, Master, what should this lowly one do? Yu Zhanggui stared at the sword in his hand and couldn't help but reach out to take it. He turned it over and over in his hand and examined it, causing the other clan members to look at it with envy. Yu Zhanggui stood up from his chair and pulled out the sword. The sword was blue like autumn water. Under the sunlight, the sharp blade glowed with envy. Yu Zhanggui stood up from his chair and pulled out his sword with a shwa sound. The blade of the sword was as clear as autumn water. Under the sunlight, the sharp edge of the sword was glowing. Good sword. It's really a good sword. All the relatives kept praising it. In fact, they couldn't tell if it was a good sword or not. They mainly thought that it was something from a sword immortal. How could it be bad? In addition, the sword looked so beautiful, so they naturally concluded that it was a good sword. This sword was personally refined by Yu Qianqiu, and there were many more in Utopia. As he could only control 100 flying swords, these were all in stock. However, compared to the treasured swords of the mortal world, this flying sword of the Dharma artifact level was incomparable in terms of workmanship and material. Yu Zhanggui put the sword back into its scabbard and handed it to Fu Qing. This isn't an ordinary sword. It's the eldest young master's flying sword. Since the eldest young master has already given you the authority, just do as he says. You can mobilize all the servants in the residence. Go. The moment he said this, all the servants looked at Fu Qing with envy. Some of the unmarried maids looked at Fu Qing with splendor in their eyes. Yes. Fu Qing retreated. He never thought that a servant guarding the door would have such great authority. This thing was not inferior to an imperial sword. Thinking of the eldest young master's words, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly mobilized people and surrounded all the relatives. Yu Qianqiu still had some impression of the Octagon village's location. After leaving the Yu residence, it only took him a few moments to find the Octagon village's hideout in a mountainous area that was 100 miles away. He landed on the sword and immediately caused a commotion in the hideout. Yu Qianqiu sized up the village. It was built on the basis of danger. It was indeed a good place that was easy to defend and hard to attack. It was no wonder that even the authorities couldn't take it down. He squinted his eyes and stared at the signboard at the main entrance of the stronghold. On it were the words, Zhiyi Hall. He snorted in his heart. It seemed like robbers liked to use this gimmick. At this moment, a group of people came out of the hall. All of them were holding shining swords and spears. Needless to say, the burly man in the middle was the leader of the bandit hideout. The man was stunned when he saw Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was also stunned when he saw him. The burly man was wearing the same clothes as him. It was the standard clothes of the supporting immortal island. After a closer look, he was astonishingly at the 10th level of the Qi refinement realm. The man excitedly strode over and kowtowed. He said, Lu Li greets Senior. Senior has come here, but the sect wants. He was so excited that he couldn't continue speaking. The group of bandits behind him were also dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu was stunned again. He immediately understood everything. So this guy was also an unlucky person who was chased out of the supporting immortal island. No wonder the second leader knew a little about the cultivation world. Looking at this guy's expression, he probably thought that the supporting immortal island wanted to call him back. Wishful thinking. I was wondering who was causing trouble here. So it was the abandoned disciple of the supporting immortal island. You actually dared to wear the clothes of the supporting immortal island. You really don't want to live. Yu Qianqiu snorted. The man kowtowed again. Senior, please forgive me. After I left the supporting immortal island, I really didn't know how to survive. I could only bring a group of people to become bandits. Yu Qianqiu thought about it. A disciple who wasn't even at the foundation establishment stage couldn't even be compared to a martial arts expert. Moreover, most of them had lost contact with the outside world since they were young. They knew nothing about survival. Ling Feng and the others were also at a loss when they were just chased out. Like Guan Yu, he ended up pretending to be a Taoist in a Taoist temple to swindle people. Thinking about this, his anger dissipated a lot. He said in a deep voice, "You are Lu Li, right? Get up. I'm not here to catch up with you. Where is the kidnapped kid in the Yu residence?" Lu Li quickly got up and pointed to the horse pen. "That kid is locked up there. You didn't do anything to him, right?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at him coldly. No, not even a strand of hair is missing." Lu Li wasn't an idiot. He could tell that this kid was related to the people from the supporting immortal island. In his heart, he cursed the employer's ancestors, but he didn't know that he was also cursing Yu Qianqiu's ancestors. Yu Qianqiu slowly walked into the horse pen. Instantly, a rage burned in his chest. A kid whose face could be vaguely seen was about 8 or 9 years old. He was glaring at the people who came in. His body was covered with grass and horse dung. He was tied up tightly and his mouth was stuffed with a dirty cloth. His cheeks were swollen and there was a clear palm print. It was obvious that he had been slapped. This was his younger brother, Yu Wuqiu. He. This is what you meant by not even a strand of hair is missing. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Lu Li with a cold smile. He originally wanted to take him in for his own use. But now, he was sentenced to death on the spot. The latter was so scared that his head was full of sweat. He stuttered and didn't know what to say. Yu Qianqiu walked to the kid's side and pulled out the rag in his mouth. A trail of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Who knew that the kid would spit out a mouthful of bloody saliva the moment he loosened his mouth? He opened his mouth and cursed, "Evil thieves, kill me if you have the guts. Otherwise, I will trample your den to the ground in the future." Yu Qianqiu, who was spat on his face, was stunned. Then, he smiled bitterly and wiped his face. This brat spoke without rhyme or reason. He didn't know how to beat around the bush. If he was really a bandit, seeing him like this, I'm afraid he would really eliminate the root of the problem to prevent future troubles. He immediately flicked his finger on the kid's forehead and scolded jokingly, "Brat, what are you spitting for? I'm Yu Qianqiu. Bastard, how dare you flick my forehead? You're Yu Qianqiu, right? Okay, I'll remember you. You're Yu Qianqiu. Why is your name the same as my big brother's?" The kid's tattered face was crooked. "Nonsense, I'm your big brother. Father sent me to save you," Yu Qianqiu said unhappily. Chapter 144. There's no proof. The kid showed a suspicious expression. "What proof do you have to prove that you are my brother? Bastard, you're so smart. If you were smart, how could you be tied up here?" Yu Qianqiu flicked him again, causing him to cry out in pain. He casually broke the ropes binding him, got up, stared at Lu Li, and asked, "This was caused by Yu Zhangping's family and you, right? How did you know? Could it be that the second-in-command who went down the mountain told you?" Lu Li was shocked. Only he and the second head knew about this. He didn't tell anyone else. It was the second head who told him. It wasn't a good thing to betray one's employer. Yu Qianzhou sneered. With Yu Zhongping's character, he shows everything on his face. Do you need someone to tell you? As for your second head, I saw that he wasn't feeling well, so I sent him to reincarnate. It's him. Suddenly, the kid pointed at his swollen face and said, "It was Yu Zhongping, that bastard. He tricked us out of the city. My face is swollen because of him." Ah. You killed the second head. Then there are two other brothers? Lu Li was shocked. Yu Qianzhou glanced at the child and didn't say anything. He turned back to size up Lu Li and asked curiously, "I say, Lu Li, have you been away from supporting Immortal Island for too long, or have water entered your brain? Do I need to report to you when I kill people? Stop talking nonsense with me. If it wasn't for the fact that we were from the same sect, your head would have been removed. Go and gather all your minions. I have something to say." Lu Li seemed to be drained of all his strength. He said dejectedly, "Yes," and walked out slowly. Maybe because he was tied up for too long, Yu Wuchou's limbs were a little stiff. Yu Qianzhou looked at him and smiled. "Can you still walk? Do you want me to carry you?" Yu Wuchou was embarrassed into anger. "Who wants you to carry me? I can walk by myself." He suddenly asked curiously, "Are you really my brother?" He kept looking at the stranger in front of him. "Follow me if you can." Yu Qianzhou couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He thought to himself, "You're just a little kid, yet you're already so arrogant. This is the problem of spoiling the children of big families. If this goes on, you'll be at a disadvantage. Today, I'll teach this cheap little brother a lesson, lest he doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Dang, dang, dang. The urgent sound of a gong rang outside, and the entire stronghold became lively. Lu Li stood on a small wooden platform and looked at the hundreds of subordinates that had gathered. His face was ashen and he did not make a sound, as if he had a premonition that something bad was about to happen. However, Yu Qianzhou's strength was not something he could fight against. To put it bluntly, killing him was as easy as killing an ant. A group of subordinates stood in an orderly manner below the platform. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly in his heart. They were quite disciplined. He looked back at the little kid who was limping behind him and said, "Follow me." Lu Li took the lead and walked to the side of the wooden platform. The little kid struggled to climb up, but before he could stand firm, Yu Qianzhou grabbed the back of his collar and lifted him up. "Let go of me, I can walk." The little kid's struggle was futile. Yu Qianzhou pointed at the group of people below and said, "Originally, I wanted to let them go today, but you said you wanted to flatten this place. Fine, I'll fulfill your wish today." As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Li knelt down and begged, "Senior, please let them go. They have parents and children at the foot of the mountain. Their families depend on them to earn money. If they weren't forced to, they wouldn't have followed me up the mountain to become bandits. Once they're killed, their families won't be able to survive. Senior, please have mercy." The subordinates all looked terrified. They had all seen Yu Qianzhou descend from the sky. To them, those who could fly in the sky were like gods. Now that this god said he wanted to kill them, they immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. In an instant, the entire mountain camp was filled with begging voices. "What do you mean by taking care of the elderly and children? After you die, tell those words to the people you killed. Since you've come out to make a living, you must understand that sooner or later, you'll have to pay for what you did. It's not that I won't pay, it's that the time isn't right." Yu Qianzhou slowly said in a cold voice. "No. Senior, I beg you, no." Lu Li hugged his leg and begged. Scram! Yu Qianzhou directly kicked him off the platform. Then, he shook the little kid and shouted, "Watch carefully." In fact, Wuxia was already a little stunned. He had never seen so many people kneeling and begging. As soon as he finished speaking, nearly 100 cold lights shot out from the storage bag, crazily sweeping towards the people kneeling on the ground. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere, flesh and blood flew everywhere, and screams shook the sky. The little kid was stunned at first. When he came to his senses, his whole body trembled. He covered his eyes with his little hands, unable to watch anymore. Yu Qianzhou coldly snorted. Today, he was going to kill this person for you to see. You have no choice but to watch. His thumb and index finger pinched the back of the little kid's neck, and a stream of true essence entered his body. The little kid's hands immediately drooped down, and his eyes were wide open. Witnessing the bloody, violent, and wanton killing in front of him, he could not speak, nor could he close his eyes. He could not move, and could only watch and listen. Crystal clear tears continuously flowed down his cheeks. Below the platform, Lu clenched his fists and knelt there with tears streaming down his face. He looked up to the sky and howled. But none of those wantonly killing flying swords touched him. Those who wanted to escape were immediately shredded into pieces by a few cold lights. There were also those who wanted to fight it out with Yu Qianzhou before they died. Unfortunately, they did not even have the chance to get close. Their legs were nowhere to be seen, and when they fell, they were already shredded into pieces. In just a short while, apart from Lu, not a single living person could be seen below. Broken limbs were everywhere, and the blood on the ground gathered into streams that flowed towards the lower ground. The smell of blood in the air was suffocating. After killing those who needed to be killed, Yu Qianzhou's divine sense moved, and 100 cold lights swept towards the various buildings in the village with an unstoppable momentum. Crashing sounds could be heard everywhere. Not long after, smoke and dust rose everywhere. Even the erected flagpole was not spared. The cold lights retracted, and the sounds disappeared. The surroundings finally quieted down, and only Lu's sobbing could be heard below the platform. The entire octagon village was no longer recognizable. Only the wooden platform under Yu Qianzhou's feet remained the same, standing there alone. Yu Qianzhou turned the little lad's head around and let him look around. He said, "Didn't you want to flatten this place? I've already done it for you, but what's wrong with you? Why don't you even dare to look? If you don't even dare to look, what gives you the right to say that you want to flatten this place?" Yu Qianzhou lifted him up and faced him, shouting, crying. "Why are you crying? You only have this little guts, and this little bit of guts. Are you even worthy of saying such things?" As he spoke, he turned him around again, letting him witness the tragic scene around him. He spun around and shouted, "Do you see that? Originally, I did not intend to kill them, but you said you wanted to flatten this place. Alright, it's flattened now. Why are you crying? Are you regretting it? Then why did you open your mouth and speak such nonsense? Let me tell you now, as a man, you must be responsible for every word you say. Everything in front of you is the result of your careless words. Look carefully at everything here." After a while, when he was almost done lecturing Lu, Yu Qianzhou bent over and picked up Lu. Then, he carried the two of them and flew away on his sword. Just as he stood up, the wooden platform collapsed. The entire octagon village was completely flattened. Chapter 145. Inside the Yu clan's courtyard, Yu Qianzhou descended from the sky with two people in his hands, his long sword returning to its scabbard. Everyone was shocked when they saw Yu Wuqia's appearance. They didn't expect the Yu clan's young master, who usually lived a luxurious life, to end up like this, especially with the two palm prints on his face. When the patriarch and his son saw the people brought by Yu Qianzhou, their faces turned deathly pale. Yu Chonggui waved his hand to disperse the crowd, then hurriedly walked up to his son, who had a lifeless expression on his face, and asked anxiously, "Wucho, what happened to you?" "Father, he's fine. He was just a little frightened," Yu Qianchou said calmly. At this moment, Yu Wucho was awoken by his father's familiar face. When he came back to his senses, he saw that Yu Qianchou was like he had seen a ghost. He hurriedly hid behind Yu Changui, hugged his arm, and pointed at Yu Qianchou, screaming, "Father, he killed people. He really killed people. He killed so many people. So many people died." Everyone looked at Yu Qianchou at the same time, but they clearly weren't surprised that he had killed people. Yu Changui looked at his eldest son, puzzled, and asked, "What happened?" "It's nothing. It's just a few hundred small fries from the Octagon camp. I casually took care of them. In the future, there won't be any more Octagon camp bandits in this area," Yu Qianchou said with a calm smile. He said it lightly, but everyone's hair stood on end. A few hundred people were all killed by him in less than 4 hours? The more they thought about it, the colder they felt. When did the Yu clan have such a killer? You killed them all? Yu Changui frowned. Obviously, he was a little unhappy with his son's massacre. "I didn't kill them all. I left one alive." Yu Qianchou shook his head and pointed at the man lying on the ground. He sneered and said, "This is the Octagon Stronghold's big leader, Lu Li. He has a close relationship with our patriarch and his son. I've already asked him, and he's already explained everything. This time, the kidnapping of my younger brother was the doing of the sanctimonious patriarch of our Yu clan, father and son. Their goal was to steal our clan's wealth. They were going to kill the hostages as soon as they got the gold, and then think of a way to get rid of my father, so that there would be no successor for our family, and then find a reason to swallow our property." The 2 handprints on his younger brother's face were personally slapped by Yu Zhongping after he tricked him out of the city. "It's just that they never expected me to come back at this time." The Yu clan's relatives immediately went into an uproar. They instantly distanced themselves from the father and son. It would be best if they didn't get hurt by this killer. Yu Qianchou sneered in his heart. Just by looking at the father and son's expression, he knew that this wasn't something that his son could do alone. "This daddy doesn't have time to be long-winded with you. I'll first make up a crime for you. In any case, it's just that. If I didn't care about this old man's face, would have killed you long ago." Yu Changui's complexion turned ashen. He fiercely turned his head and glared at the father and son. He shouted, "Unsatisfied beasts, what else do you 2 dogs have to say?" When the patriarch and his son saw Yu Qianchou bring Lu Li and Yu Wucho here, they knew that everything was over. They originally wanted to quibble, but when they saw the gloomy expression in Yu Qianchou's eyes, they couldn't say anything. In the face of such a powerful opponent, any kind of explanation was unnecessary. Suddenly, Yu Changping rushed out of the crowd and knelt in front of Yu Changui's feet. He repeatedly kowtowed and said, "Big brother, I was blinded by greed. Big brother, for the sake of being from the same clan, please spare me this time." As he spoke, he slapped his own mouth. Yu Changui kicked him away and sternly shouted, "Bastard, I don't have a brother like you. Come, tie up this father and son pair and send them to the government office together with this bandit." Several able-bodied men immediately took ropes and tied up the 3 men tightly, and then they were pushed out of the room. The Yu clan's relatives shook their heads and sighed. They didn't expect this sanctimonious father and son pair to have such wild ambitions. How many people didn't covet this family's wealth? Wait. Yu Changui suddenly sighed and said, "Forget it, family shame shouldn't be spread in public. Just send them to the ancestral hall and deal with them according to the clan's rules." Then he cupped his hands towards the other clan members and said, "I hope that when we carry out the clan's rules, the clan members can be witnesses. That's right. Family shame shouldn't be spread in public." "Of course. Don't worry, big brother. We all saw it with our own eyes, so we must be witnesses." Everyone agreed. Yu Chonggui was the clan's biggest financial backer. If they didn't do him a favor, then when would they do him a favor? In any case, they wouldn't lose anything. At this time, Yu Qianchou suddenly stood up with a smile and bowed to everyone, saying, "Junior also has a matter to ask of all the uncles and brothers. Junior came back this time because of my father's summons. Since this matter is over, Junior still needs to go out and cultivate. As for this matter, I hope that all the uncles and brothers can keep it a secret for Junior. Just pretend that Junior never appeared in this matter, please." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone immediately agreed, but the atmosphere from before was gone. Although they were all clan members, the crux of the matter was that this fellow was too ruthless. Killing people was like cutting vegetables, and he didn't even blink. Who knew what the consequences would be if they said the wrong thing? But from his words, everyone thought of one thing. It turned out that there was such a powerful son hiding behind Yu Chonggui, and he could summon him at any time, but he had never said anything about it. How sinister. Fortunately, they hadn't offended him too much. Otherwise, if something happened, it would be a massacre. Who could resist that? Everyone shuddered at the thought of it. Yu Qianchou smiled and thanked them. This was the effect he wanted. It wasn't easy for him to come back, so he had no choice but to use such a ruthless method. Since they had met, he had to get rid of them completely. In the future, he wouldn't place his thoughts here. A group of clan members and servants escorted the three people out of the Yu residence. The surroundings instantly became much quieter. Yu Wuchou hid behind his father, craning his neck to secretly size up this elder brother of his. This elder brother was really a little too scary. Yu Qianchou smiled at him. He had thought that Yu Wuchou had been frightened, and he had to adjust his emotions a little to prevent it from leaving a shadow in his heart. Now, it seemed that this brat was born with courage, and there was no need to worry. What you said just now was all true? Yu Chonggui looked at him and frowned. Yu Qianchou was stunned, and he asked in surprise, "What was true? You said that you still had to go out to cultivate. Didn't you come back with success this time?" Yu Chonggui asked. Yu Wuchou, who was behind him, suddenly shook him and asked, "Father, is he really my elder brother, Yu Qianchou?" Yu Chonggui lowered his head and shouted, "Bastard, if he isn't your elder brother, who else could he be?" Yu Wuchou pointed at Yu Qianchou and said embarrassedly, "But he killed a lot of people." "Father, he really killed a lot of people. Hundreds of people were all killed by him." "Ignorant!" Yu Chonggui shouted, "If your elder brother didn't want to save you, would he have killed so many people?" When he remembered that the Octagon village had kidnapped both of his sons, he felt a wave of disgust in his heart. He thought that it was good to kill them. If they didn't kill them, who knew when they would kidnap his grandson again? Yu Qianchou smiled and suddenly reached out to Fu Qing, who was standing not far away. The sword that Fu Qing was holding flew into his hand, causing the latter to panic. Yu Qianchou handed the sword to his brother and said with a smile, "Take it." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.